I've had enough. I hate to ask, but can I stay at your place for a few days? My dad stood at my door, looking defeated. My sisters and mom had kicked him out of the house. Seeing my once strong father talk about reaching his limit made me feel responsible. I couldn't help but blame myself. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, trying to apologize for not being able to ease his pain. But before I could say more, my husband Ethan spoke up. Let's have your dad live with us. Are you sure? I asked, surprised. Even my dad was shocked, his eyes wide. My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. Ethan and I started dating in college, and we've been married for 2 years. We have a good balance between work and home, and Ethan has always been my biggest supporter. He gives me confidence, and I feel lucky to be with him. I'm the youngest of 3 sisters. Growing up, I always felt like I couldn't stand up to my mom or sisters. I was often ignored and treated as the least important. Whenever I shared my thoughts, I would get harsh comments in return. So eventually, I stopped speaking up. I hid my feelings and did whatever I was told without complaining. Mom often made hurtful comments like, I wanted a boy, but when I found out you were another girl, I was disgusted. Grace and Ashley are enough for girls. You're not wanted here, but if you want to stay, you have to work. Even when I wanted to respond, I stayed quiet, swallowing my words. By the time I was in elementary and middle school, I was doing most of the housework, cooking, laundry, and preparing baths. People around me would say things like, wow, that's impressive, or you're so responsible. At first, I liked the praise, but soon, it became a routine, and I stopped feeling proud. My mom never thanked me. Instead, she criticized my cooking or the way I folded laundry. The one person who kept me going was my dad. Unlike mom and my sisters, Dad loved and respected me. He was always there for me. As the only man in the family, my dad wasn't well liked by my mom and sisters. Like me, he had little power in the household, but no matter what, he always stood up for me. I'm sorry, Emily, you have to put up with so much. I wish we could all live in peace, Dad would say, holding me tight. Even though he worked long hours, he always spent his days off with me, helping fulfill my mom and sister's demands. He listened to me and cared about how I felt, but my mom and sisters didn't like that. They'd say things like, there's no one to protect you today, and make me do more chores. They'd throw harsh words at Dad, too, calling him things like low income and disgusting. My sisters would laugh and tell him, don't open your mouth. Even though Dad tried to support me, the constant mistreatment from my mom and sisters made me feel weaker over time. Seeing how much I was struggling, Dad said something to me when I started high school. Emily, study hard and go to college. Leave this house and live your own life. You have so many possibilities. You don't have to stay here forever, Dad urged. Hearing him say that made me feel both excited and nervous. At the time, my oldest sister Grace, 6 years older than me, was attending a private university. Ashley, 4 years older, was in vocational school. Mom would often mock Dad for not making enough money and would tell me, we're poor because he doesn't bring in enough. You should start working once you graduate high school. Because of that, I believed we were financially struggling, so when Dad told me to go to college, I worried he was pushing himself too hard, but Dad reassured me, saying, there's no need to worry about money. I feel responsible for making you suffer so much, and I don't want you to endure this any longer. Dad, I started, but he continued, this is a request from your father. Don't worry about anything, just go to the university you want, study what you love, and find your passion. I want you to live a happy life to make up for all the hardship you've gone through, Dad said, gripping my shoulder with tears in his eyes. His words were full of determination. From that moment, I focused on the studies I had neglected. Despite still following the strict orders of my mom and sisters, I spent all my remaining time at my desk, studying hard. My efforts paid off when I was accepted into a university. Dad and I hugged each other, full of joy over my achievement. I kept it a secret from my mom and sisters until the last minute. On the day I was moving out, I finally told them that I was going to college and living on my own. By that time, Grace had already moved out, leaving just Mom and Ashley at home. When they found out, they yelled at me in anger, but I endured their harsh words, and at last, I broke free from them. I kept my new mobile phone, a gift from Dad, hidden from them. I didn't tell them where I was going to university or where I was living. I stayed in touch with Dad, but I started a new life without any involvement with my mom or sisters. However, just because I escaped from them didn't mean my university life was easy. I wasn't used to speaking my mind, and being shy. I felt invisible in my classes and had trouble making friends. That's when Ethan reached out to me. "What do you think, Emily?" he asked one day. Ethan was bright, confident, and popular in the group, so I was shocked that he was speaking to me. I was already uncomfortable talking in front of others, and being put on the spot made me freeze, but Ethan pressed on. "You have thoughts, right? Share them. We won't know unless you speak up." At first, I thought Ethan was pushy and didn't care about how others felt, but over time, I saw his kindness and how he respected other people's opinions. Thanks to him, I started making friends. Soon enough, I found myself drawn to Ethan, and by our third year of university, we started dating. When I told Dad about Ethan, he was thrilled and congratulated me. He celebrated every milestone in my life: when I found a job, when Ethan and I moved in together, and when we decided to get married. Dad shared in my happiness as if it was his own. Even though I was happy, I was always worried about Dad. Since I had started university, I hadn't gone back home, and I hadn't seen him in person. We kept in touch, but I couldn't help but worry, knowing he was still living with Mom and my sisters. I was sure Dad was still dealing with cruel remarks from Mom and Ashley, and spending his days following their controlling demands. "Dad, I'm happy today because of everything you did for me. Back then, I was powerless and always needed your help, but things are different now. I have a job, I'm married, and I have someone who supports me. Now it's my turn to help you. Please, let me know if you ever need anything."
I told him this when I announced my marriage. Being with Ethan had taught me the importance of expressing my feelings, and I was finally able to say things to Dad that I couldn't before. He simply replied, "Thank you," but 2 years have passed since then, and Dad has never asked me for help. Recently, I heard that Grace, who had been living on her own, quit her job and moved back to our parents' house. This only made me worry more about Dad. One day, while I was telling Ethan how concerned I was, the doorbell rang. It was late December, and though it wasn't even 4 p.m., it was already getting dark outside. We weren't expecting any deliveries, so we were surprised when we looked at the intercom screen. The person on the camera was Dad. I rushed to the front door, and for the first time in 8 years, I saw him. His cheeks were sunken, and his hair had turned mostly white. He looked sick and frail. I instantly knew this wasn't just a casual visit. "Dad, what happened? Please come inside. It must be freezing out there," I said, noticing he was only wearing trousers and a long-sleeved shirt, far too light for December weather. The reason for his thin clothes soon became clear when Dad spoke. He told me he had been kicked out of the house by Mom and my sisters. They told me to go buy dessert, so I went to the convenience store, but when I came back, the house was locked. I asked them to let me in, but they told me not to come back. "What?" I was shocked. "I left the house without my phone or jacket," Dad continued, rubbing his cold arms. "I waited for hours, but they never let me in." Hearing this, I quickly made some hot tea and handed it to Dad, trying to help him warm up. Dad held the cup of tea with both hands, trying to warm up, and quietly said, "I might not be able to go back to that house again." "Why?" I asked, worried. "Ever since Grace came back, Mom and the others have been treating me even worse. I've been feeling like I'm at my limit, and now they've done this to me. I don't even have the energy to go back. I think I'll look for a small apartment and figure out what to do next," Dad explained. "I'm sorry, but could I stay here for a few days? I'll leave as soon as I find a place." I was shocked. I knew Dad had been struggling, but I didn't realize it was this bad. For the first time, Dad, who never complained, was talking about reaching his limit. "I'm sorry, Dad," I began, feeling guilty for knowing about his troubles but not being able to help. Before I could finish, Ethan spoke up. "Let's have your father live with us." "Are you sure?" I asked, surprised. Dad, equally shocked, widened his eyes. "Sorry to be blunt, but your father doesn't look well," Ethan continued. "I think it would be best if we all live together so he can recover. We can figure out everything else later, as long as he's okay with it." Dad and I were both filled with gratitude. That's how our new life as a trio began. Just a few days after Dad moved in, the doorbell rang again. The three of us were stunned when we saw who was on the intercom: Mom and my sisters. "Why are they here?" I thought, feeling a mix of shock and bitter memories, but I knew I had to face them, so I opened the door, panicking about what they might do next. "Wow, I didn't expect you to be living in such a fancy place," Mom said, looking around. "I thought you were scraping by in some rundown apartment." Hearing her voice after so long made me feel nothing but resentment. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Your father's phone had your address in it. I didn't even know Emily had a mobile phone. Why would you give him your contact info and not us? Are you honoring the wrong person?" Grace sneered, looking down at me. Mom, smiling as if satisfied, spoke again. "Never mind, is your father here? We're having some trouble without him." Even though they said they were in trouble, none of them looked distressed. In fact, all three of them were smirking. "In trouble? You're the ones who kicked him out," I said. "You've gotten quite sassy, haven't you?" Mom snapped back. "So he is here. Move aside." "No," I firmly replied. I yelled at Mom and her group, my frustration rising. Mom's usual condescending remarks about me only made me angrier. In the past, I wouldn't have stood up to her, but I had changed, thanks to Ethan. Mom, irritated, raised her voice. "When did I give you permission to talk back? Just move, you can't even listen to what I say. I'm not the same person I used to be. I won't let you push me around anymore." "Mom," I responded firmly. Ethan stood beside me, trying to get Mom and my sisters to leave, but they wouldn't budge. We kept telling them to go, but they refused. Finally, tired of the back and forth, Mom gave up first. "Fine, I don't want to hear any more from you," she snapped. "If you won't move, at least tell us when the money will be deposited into our account. It's so annoying that all you can do is put money in, and you can't even do that properly." I was speechless. How did Mom think she had been able to live without working? My anger boiled over. "From now on, Dad will be living with us," I declared. "Neither of us will be pushed around by you anymore. You should divorce Dad and stop causing him pain." I couldn't hold back my words any longer, but Mom's response was unexpected. "Don't make it sound like I'm the bad guy," she yelled. "I've been kind enough to stay with a man who's low income and useless. You should be thanking me." "What?" I was stunned. "You're just like your father, a low-income loser," she continued. "You act high and mighty, but all you do is lick each other's wounds." I was on the verge of losing control, ready to lash out, but before I could say anything, Ethan spoke up. "Emily works hard. She's a supervisor and earns a good salary. I'd appreciate it if you didn't belittle us by saying we lick wounds," Ethan said, staring down my mom.
"Don't you dare talk back to me, you're an outsider, so stay out of this," Mom snapped at him. At that moment, Dad, who had been in the living room, appeared by my side. "I've heard enough," he said, addressing Mom. "We can't keep imposing on Emily and Ethan. Let's get a divorce." "Dad," I whispered, surprised. "That's fine," my sisters chimed in immediately. "We don't need a creepy guy like you," one of them shouted. Emboldened by my sisters, Mom agreed. "That's fine by me." I was shocked by how quickly it had been settled, but peace didn't last for long. "There's one condition," Mom added. "Hand over the house to me, and then I'll give you the divorce." I couldn't believe her greed, but Dad quickly agreed to her demand. "Dad, are you sure?" I asked, concerned. I was shocked when Dad smiled at me and said, "If that's all it takes to get a divorce, it's a small price to pay." Then, turning serious, he faced Mom and said, "I'll do as you ask. Leave for today. I'll come over tomorrow." With that, Dad sent Mom and my sisters home. They continued insulting me until the very end, but I didn't care anymore. I felt guilty for pushing Dad into getting a divorce and causing him to lose the family home, but Dad patted my shoulder and reassured me, "It's not your fault, Emily. I'm actually glad you spoke up." The next day, Dad went back home one last time with the divorce papers. He made Mom sign them, handled the paperwork, and packed his things. When he returned, he looked lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Although it was sad to see the house go to Mom and my sisters, if Dad felt relieved, I was okay with it. A few months later, Dad told me what had happened to Mom and my sisters. They had taken the house in the divorce, planning to sell it and live lavishly. However, the house was old, in a poor location, and didn't sell for much. The costs of demolishing it ate up most of the money. In the end, they were left with almost nothing. Now, without a home or savings, they struggled. Mom didn't work, and neither Grace nor Ashley had stable jobs. With Dad gone, the same man they mocked for his low income, they had no one to lean on financially and found themselves in dire straits. They tried coming to our house for help, showing up several times, but we never opened the door. They wouldn't give up, causing a commotion on the porch. Eventually, I had to tell them through the intercom, "If you don't stop, I'll call the cops." That finally made them leave. Now they barely managed to rent a small apartment, too cramped for the three of them. Even Mom, who had never worked before, was forced to get a job out of desperation. Despite all the times they mocked Dad and me, they were now constantly arguing among themselves, blaming each other for their situation. It seems some people never change. Without Dad or me around, they turned on each other, destined to live in both physical and emotional poverty. Meanwhile, our lives have taken a completely different path. Despite all the mocking about Dad's low income, we found out after the divorce that he had been quietly trading stocks for years, building a fortune. He never mentioned it because he feared that Mom and my sisters would try to seize his assets, so he waited until the divorce was finalized. Now, we live comfortably in a new house Dad built with his wealth. He quit his job to focus on his stock investments. My husband and I are both working too, so we're financially stable. We support each other while maintaining our financial independence, and we're building the loving family that we couldn't have when we were younger.
They met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Gabby, a giggly and cheerful girl, immediately took a liking to the charming and statuesque Mike. When he picked up the guitar and sang a heartfelt song, Gabby couldn't help but feel goosebumps. She had no chance but to fall in love with him. Mike also noticed a spectacular blonde in a purple dress and invited her to go out the next evening. They met at the mall and went to the evening movie session, followed by dinner at a restaurant. They spent the night walking through the city streets, talking tirelessly. "I don't remember my parents," Gabby shared her story. "I've lived with my grandparents all my life. After school, I was looking for an opportunity to help them financially. I enrolled as a part-time student at the local College of Management, studying service and tourism. I also worked as a waitress and later as a hotel maid at that time. After graduation, I started working in a travel company as a customer service specialist." "And what does a specialist like you do?" Mike asked, with playful curiosity in his voice. "My task is to offer the most suitable tours for my clients and ensure that travelers have the best impressions. You could say that I am responsible for their joy." In turn, Mike shared his story, which was quite different from Gabby's. He came from a typical patriarchal family. "We have a big family. I have an older sister and a younger brother," Mike said, putting his jacket on Gabby's shoulders to keep her warm. "My paternal grandparents also live with us. My mum takes care of our family. You know, Gabby, my father always taught my brother and me that a man should be responsible for his family. He is my role model. I started working for my father when I turned 14. We have a family cheese factory. I worked there after school 5 days a week for a couple of hours each day. My father paid me a wage for each day. It wasn't much, of course, but money earned through labour is different from money received without working. You learn to save and spend it wisely." Curious, Gabby asked, "What did you spend your first large sum of money on?" "I bought an expensive denim jacket. It was fashionable at the time, but it didn't last long. Within a week, I got into a fight after school and tore it up so badly that even my mum couldn't fix it." Gabby enjoyed listening to Mike's stories about his childhood, family, amusing quarrels with his siblings, and his business. Their first date was followed by a second, and then a third. 2 years later, they decided to get married, and Gabby was over the moon with happiness. She envisioned a wonderful life filled with love, care, and tenderness. After all, that's how fairy tales about good girls and princes end, right? However, Gabby had no idea what would come after a happy ending in real family life, and soon learned this through her own bitter experience. After the romantic honeymoon phase, quarrels and complaints began to emerge. The relationship became strained, often triggered by trivial matters such as a forgotten bag of garbage or an unwashed cup in the sink. Additionally, Mike believed that the word wife equated to the status of a slave, constantly reminding Gabby, "You are my wife, and you are obliged." This was followed by a long list of obligations imposed on Gabby. Despite working herself, she was responsible for all the household chores. Due to her busy schedule, she couldn't always find the time to cook a hot dinner and serve it on the table. Mike, you could warm up the soup, cook yourself eggs, or, in the end, order takeout, said Gabby to her hungry and grumpy husband. I really don't have time to cook. My mum had time for everything. More than once, Mike informed his spouse, keeping silent about the fact that his mother was only a housewife, and at home there should be home-cooked food, not cooked by someone unknown. Your mother is always at home. One day, Gabby couldn't bear it any longer and exclaimed, She has no hobbies, no job, no interests. She only deals with household chores. So quit. Why do you need this stressful job? Mike quickly responded, Instead of serving strangers and their whims, take care of your man. However, Gabby, accustomed to work and an independent life since childhood, couldn't fathom giving it up. Mike also was angry with his wife's work, as she could be contacted by clients at any time, even on weekends. And when Gabby was offered a business trip abroad, he exploded. Don't even think about it. I know how these business trips go, and how the touristic mood lowers the moral boundaries of business travellers. Mike is used to a different life, Mike's mother commented on her son's behaviour. You should make concessions, you're a woman. He has a different vision of family life, and you grew up without parents, so you don't understand how it works. Gabby swallowed her hurt feelings and chose to remain silent. This is just a phase you're going through as you adjust to each other. Everything will get better when the child is born, the mother-in-law added. Once the baby arrives, there won't be time for arguments. And then the long-awaited 2 stripes appeared on the pregnancy test. Gabby decided to share the news with her husband in a special way. She bought a baby suit with tiny booties and a cute hat. Lovingly wrapping the outfit in a beautiful box with a bow, she presented the gift to Mike during dinner. What is this? Mike asked, intrigued by the gift. It's a surprise, Gabby replied, beaming with anticipation. The man untied the golden ribbon and lifted the lid. Initially, confusion and surprise appeared on his face. He took out the tiny booties, held them in his hand, and then saw the tiny baby suit. Finally, he noticed the positive pregnancy test with a bow. Gabby, he whispered, are you pregnant? Congratulations, exclaimed Gabby. You're going to be a father. A brief streak began in the lives of the future parents. For the first 5 months, the expectant mother felt like she was over the moon. Even with her rounded figure and large belly, she felt light, eagerly anticipating motherhood and meeting her child. During screenings and ultrasound exams, doctors noted the absence of any abnormalities in the fetus. Soon the sex of the child was revealed. It was going to be a boy. And then Gabby got a devastating blow. She accidentally discovered her husband's affair with his colleague. It happened in a foolish and absurd way, reminiscent of one of the ridiculous melodramas that Gabby's grandmother loved to watch while cooking meatballs and potatoes in the kitchen. That evening, the woman was cleaning the house, dusting and ironing her rounded belly simultaneously. She picked up her husband's smartphone from the nightstand, and right at this moment the screen lit up, revealing an incoming message from his colleague Heather Bell. Gabby would not have thought to open and read her husband's correspondence, as she trusted him completely, but the message was ambiguous. In it, Heather told her boss how much she missed him and how lonely and cold it was in her bed without him. There were also photos of Heather in her underwear, and sometimes without it. What a fool I am. Gabby shivered with excitement and shock. So this is where he disappeared in the evenings, coming back when I was asleep. This is where he worked hard for our bright future. Tears streamed from Gabby's eyes as she nervously shook. In this state, Gabby was caught by her husband, who came out of the shower. Gabby, what's wrong with you? He rushed to his wife, alarmed. Are you sick? Is something wrong with the baby? Gabby looked into his concerned face, and his gaze made her even more painful. I'm just crying with happiness. I'm happy about how wonderful you are. I wish I had known before that you are such a wonderful boss, Mike," Gabby said to her husband, holding out his smartphone. "Your employees even miss you at night and can't sleep without you." "Gabby, I can explain everything," Mike exclaimed, immediately trying to figure out how to justify himself to his wife. "Don't," Gabby said. "Don't you dare lie to my face and make up another fairy tale." The woman was devastated by her husband's infidelity, and as a result she ended up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. The cheating husband began making daily visits to the hospital. He came ashamed like a beaten dog, except he didn't whine under the windows. "Let's break up," Gabby said when she finally had the chance to talk to her husband. "You'll be free to do whatever you want." However, to her surprise, Mike did not want to. "Forgive me, Gabby, I made a mistake. I swear every day I regret it. I don't want to lose you, my darling. It was just a fling. Nothing serious. You realize it was just an attraction. I'm a man. I need passion. And you're pregnant. I swear I'll never do that to you again," he promised, tearfully kissing her hands. Mike saw how difficult it was for Gabby to say no to him and erase all the years they had spent together. "You have no right to condemn our child to a life without a father, Gabby. I will be the best father for him," he pleaded, seeing her doubts. And Gabby succumbed to the onslaught of apologies and vows of eternal love. The thought of raising a child alone was scary, and Mike was right that the baby didn't deserve to grow up without a father. When the recovered wife was discharged from the hospital, Mike carried her in his arms until the birth. He fulfilled her whims and desires, spoiled her with favourite desserts and healthy fruits. In these couple of months, he had become the same Mike from the distant past, in love, romantic and caring. And then the long-awaited day had arrived. Painful contractions, the orderly tone of doctors during labour, and the long-awaited cry of the child. And then the long-awaited cry of the child. And then the baby's face had a gaping hole in his upper lip that extended to his nose. The doctors looked at each other as they announced the diagnosis to the new mother, who hadn't even had time to fully rejoice at her son's birth. "The boy's diagnosis is congenital cleft lip and palate," the doctors informed her. "What now? What are the consequences for us?" Gabby asked with a sinking heart as she cradled the baby snugly, nestled on her breast. Despite the defect on the baby's face, Gabby's love for him was deep and unconditional. "In this condition, there is a defect in the tissues of the upper lip, causing displacement and deformation of the lip and nose contours. It may affect the child's speech and bite in the future, and there is a possibility of deformity in the upper jaw. Surgery will be necessary." Gabby, having recovered from the initial shock, felt a strong bond with her son. She and Mike had not yet decided on a name for him, but as she looked at him, the name David came to mind. "David," Gabby whispered mentally, gently kissing her baby's head. "David, my son, my little one." The fact that the child had a defect only deepened Gabby's love for him. However, not everyone shared the same attitude. Upon hearing the news from the maternity hospital, Mike's relatives began to call the exhausted Gabby. Their reactions were all the same. No one in the family wanted a child with a deformity. "He will become a freak, a burden for you, and a laughingstock for others. He will be bullied for the rest of his life. Do you really want a son like that?" Mike's mother repeatedly asked Gabby. "We will have the surgery," Gabby insisted time and time again. "This defect is not a problem anymore." "Really? I have also learned a lot about these babies. There will be a long rehabilitation process, and the scar will remain. He may have speech problems and who knows what else. What kind of job will he be able to get? What kind of family will he have? Who will look at him with that face?" the woman persisted. "Write a refusal. You're young, you can give birth to a healthy child. Don't torment yourself or Mike. My poor Sonny is totally frustrated by that." Gabby was disgusted by the absurdity of it all. She couldn't fathom that these people actually believed what they were saying. Could they actually discard a precious baby like a defective item? A baby so small and defenseless, it was incomprehensible to her. But what struck her the most were her husband's words over the phone. "Well, Gabby," he began, his slurred voice revealing his drunkenness, "I was told that such a pathology can only be caused by bad heredity. These children are born to alcoholics and drug addicts." "But that's a lie. We are healthy, you know that," Gabby protested, feeling a mix of anger and hurt for herself and her innocent child. "We are? But who were your parents? You never told me," her husband hissed into the phone. "Maybe they were alcoholics, drug addicts. What else haven't you told the truth about? Maybe you made up a story and conveniently forgot about them." Tears welled up in Gabby's eyes and she hung up the phone, not wanting to listen to her husband's accusations. When Gabby asked the doctor about the possible causes of the condition, he tried to reassure her as much as possible. "There can be many reasons, not just genetics. For example, poor environmental conditions, viral and infectious diseases, complications during pregnancy, or imbalances in certain vitamins. Did you experience any stress during pregnancy? That could also be a factor." Gabby recalled her husband's infidelity and the difficult process of forgiving him. She remembered how her fingers trembled and her heart raced. Could it be the reason? In the end, the child who was supposed to bring Gabby and Mike together and mend their broken relationship only drove them further apart. Gabby's rose-coloured glasses fell off, and the sharp shards pierced her face, causing pain but also awakening her. She looked at her husband with new eyes, wondering how she hadn't seen all of this before. Had his callousness, indifference, and aggression been so well hidden that she hadn't noticed them? Could she have fallen in love with such a man? He must have been influenced by his relatives, Gabby thought, trying to justify him. He was always under the pressure of his parents, their opinions, with almost no freedom to have his own thoughts and make choices. I need to see him and find out everything face to face. No one came to the maternity hospital to pick up Gabby, so she had to take a cab home. As soon as she entered the house, she called out to the new father, asking if he wanted to meet his son. However, Mike's reaction to the baby was one of contempt and disgust. "If you gave birth to an invalid, then bring him up yourself. I need a normal heir, not a sick child." "Mike, are you out of your mind? It's just a cosmetic defect." The woman was indignant. "What will he have? A scar on his face? Some children are born with incurable diseases, severe heart defects. That's a really terrible situation. But our baby will only probably not pronounce some letters well." "It's not my baby, Gabby," Mike harshly cut off his wife. "If you choose him over me, I'm leaving." That evening, Mike packed his things and left his wife and newborn son. He made it clear that he had no intention of returning to their apartment. Much later, she learned that Mike did not return to the family nest under the wing of his mother. No, the man began to live together with his mistress Heather. Over the phone, Mike told Gabby that if she signed the divorce papers and got the child registered in her name, she could keep the apartment. He also promised to provide some financial support initially. Gabby didn't have the strength to argue or throw her phone against the wall. The first few months of her child's life were a blur, filled with tears of resentment, injustice, hormonal changes, and worries about milk supply and sleepless nights. "Everything will be all right, David," she said one dark night to her son, pressing the baby to her breast and choking on her tears. "Do you know that scars adorn a man? I'll have you the strongest, the bravest, the best. I will love you more than life. I'll do anything for you." In Gabby's life, only her grandmother remained. Her grandfather had passed away long ago. Despite Gabby's protests and assurances that she could manage on her own, her grandmother came from the village to help. She sold her house to gather some money and moved in with Gabby and David. "To hell with your Mike," grumbled the older woman menacingly and resolutely. "The trash has cleaned itself out of the house. What kind of real man would give up his wife and child? We'll find you a new one, Gabby. Don't whine. We'll bring up the child. And get a grip on yourself. The child needs you healthy and strong." Gabby dedicated all her spare time to her son. She never let him out of her sight and closely monitored his feedings to prevent him from choking. At night, she woke up multiple times, not just to change diapers, but also to check on David's breathing. Gabby tried her best to protect him from any potential danger. She read reference literature about his condition and joined a forum where parents of children with similar conditions shared advice. When David turned 6 months old, he had surgery to repair his lip. As time went on, he continued to grow, but efforts to speak only resulted in throaty sounds. This continued until he turned 5 years old, at which point David had surgery to close his palate. When the stitches were removed and the pain subsided, a miracle occurred for the entire family. David spoke. Gabby would remember for the rest of her life the moment when David first uttered the word every mother cherishes. "Mum." Although many mothers heard this word much earlier, Gabby's joy was immeasurable. From that moment on, David became an unstoppable chatterbox. It seemed like he was trying to make up for all the years of silence, constantly chattering and wanting to know and share everything. And the boy spoke perfectly, without any nasal quality, contrary to what doctors and acquaintances had warned Gabby about. But they still encountered problems. David did not attend kindergarten at all, and he had to face with his bully peers in 1st grade. One day the boy came running home in the middle of the school day, slamming the door and leaving his backpack in the hallway. Only Grandma was home, busy cooking pea soup and croutons. She found her great-grandson in a pitiful state. His hair was dishevelled, his white shirt was missing buttons, and one of his eyes was red. "What's happened, David?" the elderly woman exclaimed, dropping her kitchen towel. "I'm not going to school any more," the child sniffed angrily. "They all call me names. They say that my face is crooked and my lip is strange." Over time, David learned to accept the situation and the attention from others. As he grew older, he became more confident and charming. To all questions about his scar, he would respond enigmatically with a smile or answer with made-up stories, depending on his mood. "A dog attacked my face, a huge pit bull terrier," he would say. "An arrow flew into my face, but I caught it with my teeth," he would laughingly explain. "I got kissed by a fan," he would tell a new tale, slyly looking at the pretty girl. David managed to turn his aesthetic flaw into a unique feature. "Scars adorn a man," his mother would repeatedly say, encouraging him. She had been telling him this since childhood, and David believed it. In many ways, Gabby played a significant role in ensuring that David grew up as a confident and secure individual. She surrounded him with love and care, never allowing him to doubt that he was a wonderful person. When David was still a baby, Gabby had discussions with a representative from a charitable foundation that assisted children with congenital defects. "I worry about his future," Gabby admitted honestly. "Children can be mean and cruel. What if his peers bully him?" "You know, the most important thing for a child is the atmosphere within the family. The attitude of the people around them depends on it," a specialist told Gabby. "It's similar to when you plant 2 seeds in the soil. You speak affectionate words to one and mean, insulting words to the other. Only the one you treat kindly will germinate. It's the same with children. Our ward had a family where his parents were ashamed of him. They wouldn't even leave the house. As a result, he grew up to be uptight, nervous, and unsociable. He believed that he wasn't worthy of socialization and kindness from others. He was burdened with insecurities. On the other hand, when a child feels loved, they grow up to be happy. If a person is confident and feels healthy, the rest of the world has no chance to disagree with them. Gabby also worried that her son was growing up without a male role model, surrounded only by women. That's why at the age of 8, she enrolled her son in karate. "Gabby, are you crazy?" Grandma exclaimed while flipping pancakes on the griddle. "You should have sent him to hockey instead. At least they wear helmets." "That's where he would have broken his nose for sure. And by the way, your hockey players don't have any teeth left because they lose them on the ice or get them knocked out with their sticks," Gabby argued. Karate is a Japanese martial art that fosters willpower, character, and even communication skills. Despite the arguments between David's great-grandmother and mother, the karate lessons turned out to be useful. His health improved, and he became more confident. In high school, Gabby started discussing the topic of plastic surgery. "David, I've been saving up for plastic surgery," she said, calling her son for a serious conversation. "Mum," the guy waved her off with a laugh. "What am I to you, some kind of girl to get lip surgery? Maybe I should get some Botox too." At first, Gabby looked at her son, trying to see if there was any internal discomfort behind his laughter. Although she didn't see any flaws in his appearance and considered him incredibly handsome, she knew that a mother's heart can be a biased critic. She simply wished for her son to live in harmony with himself and be happy. As time passed, the scar on his lip seemed to fade as he grew older. It became paler and narrower. Whenever David smiled, which happened very frequently, his smile looked extremely attractive and artistic. He never felt insecure and always had the attention of girls, which is important for a high school student. Overall, Gabby succeeded in the most important thing. She raised a confident young man. Charismatic and charming, he spoke beautifully and had a beautiful singing voice. Grandma often commented, "An artist is growing up, a future Sinatra." But fate turned out differently and took David far away from the way of singers and actors. David chose the path of a lawyer for himself. After school, he applied to the local state university at the Faculty of Law. The days felt long, and the whole family anxiously waited for the results. Gabby was particularly exhausted. At the designated day, when David was supposed to find out the result, she nervously paced around the office, peering at her colleagues' faces. "Don't worry so much, Gabby," Courtney, Gabby's friend and colleague, pulled her back. "Your naughty boy will get in. He's clever. With his sharp tongue, he'll build a successful career as a lawyer." "That's true," the woman nodded, pouring a glass of water from the cooler. "But law is a highly competitive field, especially for budgetary positions. Would I be able to pay for his education?" At that moment, Gabby's cell phone rang. "Well, David, what is it?" "Mum," the voice of her son sounded distant. "How much money do we have saved?" Gabby's legs weakened and she sat down on the computer chair like a doll. She immediately realized her son got accepted, but only for paid tuition. Gabby had money. She had been saving for David's plastic surgery for a long time, not wanting to spend it in case David changed his mind and wanted to remove the scar. "Well," Gabby said, looking at herself. "Don't worry, David, we'll figure something out. We'll have enough money for the first year, maybe even 2. Gabby remembered that studying law was expensive, but she couldn't recall the exact amount. Her son suddenly laughed. "Do you want to say that we have a large sum of money somewhere, and you're still wearing an old jacket?" David's voice sounded cheerful and businesslike, devoid of the previous mournful tone. "No, Mum, that's not good. I hope you take a significant amount from there and buy yourself some new clothes. As the mother of a budget student, you have to look your best." Gabby blinked, trying to process the information she had just heard. Courtney nervously watched her face, crunching on a waffle and nodding inquisitively. "So, what's the news? What's happening?" And Gabby couldn't answer what was happening because she didn't even understand it herself. "Mum, have you lost the power of speech? Or have you fainted from happiness? I'm telling you that I got in, on a budget. A few years of studying and your son will become a lawyer. Why are you silent?" "David, darling, congratulations." Once she had regained control of her emotions, Gabby babbled. "Let's celebrate tonight, shall we? I'll buy a cake. I'll cook your favourite meal. Would you like that?" But joy settled in their apartment for only a brief period. One morning, Grandma didn't get up, didn't put on her favourite yellow slippers, and didn't shuffle her way to the kitchen for tea. Both David and Gabby were mourning the loss of a loved one. Grandma had filled the role of Gabby's mother during her childhood, and had become a reliable support when Gabby became a mother herself. A gaping and cold void replaced Gabby's heart, leaving her with only one source of joy in her life, her son. "You should find a man, Gabby," Courtney unexpectedly said 4 months later. They were spending Friday evening together, and when the women switched from tea to stronger drinks, Courtney had awakened her inner matchmaker, eager to find a boyfriend for her friend. "Man?" Gabby frowned. "Yeah," her friend exclaimed. "You spend every evening alone at home. Besides work in the apartment, you see nothing. Soon you'll be covered in dust and mould. It can't go on like this. Where's your laptop?" Rolling up her sleeves and armed with a glass of white sparkling wine, Courtney opened the first dating site that came up. "Do you have any beautiful photos?" she asked businesslike as she pressed the registration button. When David, a third-year student, returned home, he found the two women doubled over in laughter. They were sitting in front of a laptop screen, looking at and reading particularly interesting profiles. The idea, which initially seemed like a prank and a delusion to Gabby, turned out to be not so bad. She began communicating with men and going on dates. Gabby received compliments once again, feeling feminine and attractive. One evening after dinner, David said to his mother, "Listen, Mum, I'd like you to meet someone." "With whom?" Gabby had never broached the subject of girls and relationships with her son. Secretly, she worried about his romantic endeavours. "My girlfriend, Nancy." David announced his news warmly. "She works part-time as a photographer and studies journalism at my university. We met when I was in my second year, and she was in her first. A year later, we started dating." David looked at his mum with a smile. "Listen, Mum, things seem to be getting serious. Nancy is a beautiful girl, and you'll definitely like her." The meeting took place over the weekend. The initial awkwardness quickly dissipated. The charming brunette with brown eyes, an open smile, and a contagious laugh conquered Gabby, and the way Nancy looked at David dispelled any doubts. Observing her son's happiness, Gabby decided to take one more step toward her own destiny. That same evening, when the young couple went out for a walk, leaving her alone with chocolate cake, Gabby opened her laptop once again. She had never made the first move before, even though she liked men's profiles. But inspired by her son's happiness, Gabby took a deep breath, as if diving into cold water, and began typing a message to a man named Harrison. According to his profile, Harrison was involved in soccer, enjoyed cooking and travelling, and was a fan of jazz music. The profile didn't mention his occupation, but Gabby was drawn to his kind face and diverse interests. They started communicating, went on their first date, and then more followed. Gabby herself didn't realise how their initial attraction grew into love, but what mattered most was that their feelings were mutual. Harrison adored Gabby and quickly formed a bond with David, becoming like a member of their family. When David graduated from university, it wasn't just his mother who came to congratulate him. Standing proudly next to her was Harrison. Nancy, wearing a beautiful dress, eagerly snapped photos, wanting to capture every moment. The four of them went to the restaurant, resembling the big family that Gabby had always dreamed of. "David, congratulations on graduating from university." Harrison raised his glass to make a toast. A new chapter of your life has begun. I sincerely wish you success in pursuing your favourite career, which will bring you a good income. May your future be rich, bright and beautiful. And remember, if you ever need help, know that you can always rely on me. There will always be a job for you. Harrison founded the company, specialising in designing and selling water treatment plants, along with related services, and he immediately offered David a position as a lawyer, but David politely declined, as he had chosen to pursue a career in law. That evening, Gabby looked at her son and his girlfriend with joy. David confided that he wanted to propose to Nancy, and she was ready to support him. 10 years passed. A grown-up David parked a black foreign car in the office building's parking lot. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his elegant suit. He always believed that one is judged by their appearance. Carrying his briefcase filled with new case files, he headed to the office. This week, he was asked to help the businessman who had previously fallen victim to an unscrupulous lawyer, who not only failed to solve the client's problem, but also left him penniless after taking a large sum of money. David was familiar with such companies. Their main objective was to secure a contract, after which they transformed from competent professionals into deceptive tricksters. David had his own small law firm, but he hired only the best lawyers who were passionate about their work and upheld the integrity of the profession. Additionally, he is actively involved in charity work and has founded the platform Kindness of Themis. Through this platform, he provides free or low-cost legal assistance. It was through this foundation that a man named Mike Campos approached David. His case was intriguing. There were clear indications that he had been framed and falsely accused of an economic crime. Despite the efforts of his previous lawyer, nothing had been accomplished. The court had sentenced Mike to 6 years in prison for fraud. David took on this case, not only because it interested him, but also because Harrison, who personally knew the victim, asked him to do so. During their meeting, Mike shared his story with David. "I used to have a family cheese factory," he told the lawyer, "but when my father retired and left the business to me and my brother, we decided to expand, and we succeeded. The family business transformed into a large agricultural holding. However, we needed additional funds and partners. We found what seemed to be the right people, but things took a turn for the worse. We discovered fraudulent activities involving money. I was wrongfully accused of embezzling millions of dollars that I had never even seen. It became clear to me later that our so-called partners were not who they claimed to be. They set me up and wanted me out. It's too late to lament now. Will you help me?" Mike asked hopefully, his eyes filled with desperation. "I'll do my best," David replied, nodding with determination. "I will fight to clear your name." David was confident in his abilities. He never gave false hope to his clients. He had already identified numerous flaws in the case, such as the previous lawyer's failure to pursue an independent examination. The examination conducted by the prosecutors was far from satisfactory. Additionally, his colleague had not verified the authenticity of the documents that the court deemed to be falsified, disregarding the need for an explanation. David felt a surge of excitement, like a sniffer dog on the trail of its prey. He knew he would never give up. "Harrison Weir had spoken highly of you. He believes that if anyone can win this case, it's you," Mike said, clearly viewing David as his last hope. David smiled when his stepfather was mentioned, but he decided not to disclose their connection. It was unnecessary. Harrison never interfered his family into his work. "I will find a way to express my gratitude later," the businessman promised. "Right now, everything has been taken away from me, my money, my business, and even my property. Sometimes I provide assistance pro bono, so don't worry about that," David reassured him. "Believe me, I will do everything within my power to help you." David was aware that strange, even mystical legends had started to circulate about him. Satisfied clients, out of gratitude, spread stories about his incredible abilities as a defense lawyer, and his legal savvy through word of mouth. But all David did was faithfully and diligently perform his job. Now he was staying up all night studying the details of the case. His hair stood on end as he discovered new inconsistencies and gross violations. There were too many critical and unacceptable mistakes in Mike Campos's case. "I saw the light under the door, and there you are. You're not sleeping," scolded Nancy as she entered his study. "You already look like a monster from horror movies, pale, dishevelled, bruises under your eyes." David switched his gaze away from the papers and turned to his wife. "I've looked like a monster since I was a kid." "Don't be silly." Nancy approached and gently kissed the scar above his lip. Then she began to knead his stiff shoulders with dexterous fingers. David purred with pleasure, like a well-fed cat. "Well, how's it going?" Nancy nodded towards the scattered documents on the table. "I'm going to win it," declared David, confident in his abilities. "And then take a vacation. Otherwise I'll soon forget what you look like, and our daughter will start calling you uncle," Nancy said sternly. "I give you my word, as soon as I wrap up this case, you and I will take the little ones and go wherever you wish," the man promised his wife. "Why aren't you asleep?" "Erica woke me up." The woman smiled, and her tone immediately warmed at the mention of the child. "She was hungry. I fed her and went to get a drink of water." Erica was the youngest daughter of Nancy and David. Their baby just turned 9 months old last week. Erica was not the only child. Their eldest son, Charles, was already 7. He was currently visiting his grandparents in the countryside. There, Harrison and Gabby, who had been married for a long time, had built a cosy 2-story house. They often took their grandson to stay with them for various reasons. Sometimes it was because the strawberries were ripe and the child needed vitamins from the garden. Other times it was because the apples were ready to be picked. And sometimes Grandpa Harrison simply insisted that the child needed fresh air instead of the city's pollution. Charles enjoyed these trips. He already had friends outside the city, children and grandchildren of neighbours. And Grandpa Harrison would take the boy fishing and into the forest to hunt for mushrooms. David never shared his secret fear with anyone. What if his children were born like him? He didn't consider himself ugly, but he didn't want his children to face the same fate. He was particularly worried about Erica. Fortunately, everything turned out well. Their children were healthy, happy, and their loving parents considered them the most beautiful. "Go to bed, Nancy," the man said, catching his wife's hand and kissing it. He knew she was exhausted from taking care of the children. David felt guilty for not helping Nancy more. She managed all the responsibilities of the children and the household without complaining. Even when he was at home, he spent increasingly more time in his study. "You should do the same," his wife said, kissing the workaholic on the head, obediently heading to the bedroom. David watched his wife until the door closed behind her. Then he tiredly rubbed his eyelids, as if trying to regain energy. The day of the trial had arrived. Mike Campos looked pale and agitated. David thought his client had more grey hair than at their last meeting. He appeared genuinely unwell. "Don't worry, everything is under control," David assured him, attempting to calm him down. "Thank you, David," the man sincerely said. The lawyer grinned. "You'll thank me when you're free." The hearing seemed to fly by for the lawyer, but for everyone else, 5 hours passed slowly. After hearing the defendant's final statement, the court retired to the deliberation room to reach a verdict. The participants in the trial anxiously waited in ignorance for another half an hour. Mike Campos was exhausted. He couldn't calm his hands, which drummed his fingers on the table, or stop his foot from jittering under the table. He continuously wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. David remained as calm as a statue, repeatedly pouring water for the man. "Why are they absent so long?" Mike asked, finishing his second glass of water. "It's only been 15 minutes, the lawyer commented. And then The heavy door to the courtroom opened. The judge in the black robe returned to his seat. His impenetrable face revealed no emotions. Everyone stood up, and the hall froze in anticipation of the verdict from the pinnacle of justice. David, who had been composed, felt his heart race and pound in his throat. He felt like a runner approaching the finish line. Would he be the first to cross it and claim victory? Or would someone more cunning and faster overtake him? The moment of truth had arrived. The defendant, Mike Campos, is found not guilty of the crime, the judge monotonously pronounced. David, standing at attention, noticed from the corner of his eye that his client leaned back in his chair. Thank God it was not a fainting spell, but a manifestation of overwhelming happiness. It was so powerful that Mike couldn't even stand on his feet. After the hearing, he shook David's hand for a long time, gripping it tightly and unable to let go. "Thank you, dear," mumbled Mike. "I won't forget it for ages." David smiled good-naturedly, patting the man on the back. The lawyer said goodbye to the satisfied client, hurrying back to his family. He was overwhelmed by his favourite sense of triumph, which he hurried to share with his loved ones. After all, if one celebrates victory, it is with family and loved ones. What happened would have remained only in David's memory and records, if not for the ending, worthy of a Shakespearean play. It happened a month later. David was in his office when his mother dropped by. Both had a fresh tan on their skin. David himself looked rested and fresh. The lawyer was enthusiastic and eager to take on new court cases. As he promised his wife after closing the case, they went on a 2-week trip to Crete. And by family, he meant all the grandparents as well. The poor Labrador dog, Cooper, who belonged to David's mother, was the only one left behind. The vacation was great. Delicious food, olive trees, interesting excursions to the Cave of Zeus, and a water trip to the Cove of the Three Seas. It was difficult to return to the reality of everyday life, as if being pulled out of a fairy tale and shoved back into the routine. But as soon as David was in the office and immersed in the familiar atmosphere, a sense of stupor left him. He was in his element. Jurisprudence, like a fish in water. 10 minutes after Gabby entered her son's office, Mike Campos also came to the company office. The pretty secretary informed him that there was a visitor in David's office, so he would have to wait in the waiting room. Mike was in no hurry. Thankfully, he came here not with a problem but out of kindness. His business was still in a bad way, and he was deeply involved in trying to get it back on track quickly. But he was incredibly impressed with the lawyer's work, so when he learned that the man was back in town, he hastened to pay a courtesy visit. He hoped to invite the man to dinner, finally thanking him for his titanic labour. Mike Campos felt sympathy for the man at the first meeting on an intuitive level. "Maybe coffee or tea?" asked a blonde in a classic suit politely, peering out from behind the counter. "Thank you, I'll pass," the man smiled back, noting how well everything was organised in this company. The lawyers passing by were neatly and presentably dressed, all polite, collected, but pleasant. Not a single frowning face. It was as if David had assembled a team not only of competent people, but also of kind and sincere ones. The man did not notice how the door to the lawyer's office opened ajar. A visitor came out of it. She approached the secretary, exchanged a few words, and was about to leave. But upon noticing Mike, the woman stood up like a stumbling block. "Mike," she whispered hesitantly. The man raised his head and frowned. In front of him was a beautiful, statuesque woman in a beige-coloured business suit. The blonde appeared mature, but well-groomed and gorgeous. "Mike, it's you, isn't it?" she repeated as the man remained silent, and then a sharp arrow of recognition pierced him to the heart. "Gabby!" Not believing his eyes, he exclaimed. The man jumped up from his seat, taking a step toward the woman. He looked stunned, and enchanted by her, as if a beautiful vision had appeared before him, not his former spouse. Gabby smiled, having recovered from the shock. Despite all the misfortunes that had befallen her many years ago, she was still the same kind and forgiving person. Once, long ago, she thought that she would never forgive Mike for such a deep offence. But now the woman realised that she no longer felt hatred or anger, just a faint taste of bitterness. You look beautiful," Mike said, and Gabby nodded gratefully, accepting the compliment. "What are you doing here? Are you here to see a lawyer? Do you need some help? Is something wrong?" The woman did not have an opportunity to answer, because the door next to them opened and a man came out. "David, hello," Mike started at once, remembering why he came to the lawyer's office. "I came to thank you. If not for you—" "No need. For me, the highest degree of gratitude is the triumph of justice." The young man smiled modestly, shaking the outstretched hand. Then he turned to the woman, who looked confused. "Mum, is everything all right? Do you know each other?" David asked his mother. These words, said softly and calmly, sounded like thunder in a clear sky for Mike. He looked again into the face of the lawyer, so zealously defending his interests in the courthouse. He saw something that he had noticed before, but had not paid much attention to. A scar that stretched as a white stripe from his nose to his lip. Barely visible on his light skin, it now stood out clearly, brightly, as if mocking the man. "Gabby," the man whispered, turning white as a sheet. "Gabby, it can't be." Lately, life had constantly tripped Mike and hit him in the back, as if punishing him for past sins and mistakes, and now there was another blow. "Gabby," he could only squeeze out, looking at the young adult who turned out to be his own son, whom he had once abandoned. David sat the man, who was on the verge of fainting, on the sofa, and poured cool water from the cooler. "Mum, what's going on?" asked David when Mike began to come to himself, and the colour returned to his face. "David," the woman bit her lip in indecision. Was it worth it to reopen an old wound now, after so many years? But Mike, meeting her gaze, nodded weakly. In his eyes, around which gathered a fine mesh of wrinkles, pain, longing, and regret could be read. The woman felt that the man had changed. However, it was too late. Gabby sighed, daring to tell the truth. "I never told you about your father. That's my mistake, I guess. Anyway, meet him. Mike Campos is your biological father." However, this information didn't cause any violent emotions in David's soul. He realized that he had not been born from a test tube in the laboratory, although such thoughts occasionally arose in his head when he was 5 or 7 years old. But no, this is his father. But what is he exactly? A donor of part of the cells that allowed him to be born. But so what? For him, the same Harrison who appeared in David's life at the age of 20 was more father than Mike, or the coach who taught the boy karate. "I realize that asking for forgiveness now is an empty sound," Mike began his confession, "and I don't ask you to understand me. I thought at the time that I was doing everything right. When I came to my senses, it was too late, and people around me said different things, even that the baby wasn't mine, especially my mother and grandmother, and I, the fool, was fooled." That's what Gabby thought too. According to her ex-mother-in-law's opinion, her dear boy could not become the father of an unhealthy baby. Mistress Heather got involved too. The cunning snake approached the inconsolable father in time, wrapped around him in tight rings, hissed in his ear, did not let go. But all this did not justify Mike, neither in Gabby's eyes nor in David's eyes. He became a stranger to them. Only if Gabby let go of resentment, then her son still had a choice. She would accept any decision he made. "Now I realize how monstrous a mistake I made. I have no happiness in my life, no family, no loved ones, besides my brother and sister. They already have families, and I have an empty apartment. Business, and that would have lost everything to the last penny if not for David," the man lamented. "I did not save you, my wife and son, lost himself, happiness and the meaning of life. "I have long forgotten everything, Mike," the woman answered him in a calm tone, "forgotten like a terrible dream." Gabby spoke with all sincerity. She had long been happy. She had a beloved husband who loved her madly, the best son from the pride for which she sometimes glowed. She had a lovely daughter and lovely grandchildren. Happy people don't hold grudges and don't wish them on anyone. Gabby realized that it's much better to forgive and forget than to let negative feelings drive happiness out of your life. A lingering resentment destroys you from the inside out, sharpening your heart like a worm eats an apple. And then, as if all this hadn't happened, where would she be now? Her husband's mother and other relatives would have created from her life a patriarchal family in their own village, killing the woman in Gabby. She wouldn't have met Harrison then, and David would have grown up entirely different if he hadn't been taken away altogether. No, Gabby would never have traded her life for another. "I'm grateful to you anyway, Mike," she grinned softly. "You gave me the main gift, a son, the most beautiful gift in the world." Mike raised a stricken look at the lawyer. "Will you forgive me, David?" It was clear that from his tongue wanted to burst another word instead of the young man's name. But Mike did not dare to say the word aloud. It was too personal and important. He didn't deserve it. David was silent, thoughtfully resting his chin on his crossed fingers. He sat in his chair, listening attentively to the story of his mother and the man he couldn't even mentally call his father. It was as if the subject were acting as a judge, sitting on a podium in front of both sides, the accused and the accuser. "I hold no grudge against you," he began, carefully considering his words. "I have no reason to bear a grudge against strangers, but I want you to understand me correctly." He raised his eyes, as blue as Gabby's and Harrison's, looking intently and openly into the face of his biological father. "I don't have a father. I only have a mother who bent over backwards to raise me. She fed me from a spoon or a dropper when there was a hole in my face. She didn't sleep at night. She cried into her pillow when she thought I didn't notice it." Gabby sighed sadly, turning away and hiding the tears that had come. The words spoken by her son brought her back to such a terrible past for a small moment. "When I had my second operation, I was 5 years old," the young man continued, looking at the slumped, as if aged Mike with a clear gaze. "Usually people do not remember very well what happened in their childhood years. Only I clearly remembered this piece of life." David frowned as he reconstructed this part of his story. "When they took out the stitches, I was wildly in pain. But Mum was in a lot more pain than I was. That's when I realized I had no right to complain and cry. My mum was always dragging me to doctors, neurologist, speech therapist, psychologist, orthodontist. And to go to see them, she could work around the clock. When I was bullied at school, she was there for me. She took me by the hand to karate. She made time to attend all the school events. She brought tea to the room in the middle of the night when I was preparing for my diploma defense. She helped my wife pick out her wedding dress. She plays with my children." He was silent for a moment before he summarized his speech. "So, Mike, if you need legal advice, you are welcome to contact my firm. However, an attorney-client relationship is the only thing I can offer you. I don't have a father, just a mother." Mike thought he heard the thud of the judge's gavel again. The verdict was in. The judge was harsh, but fair, like life. Connie considered herself lucky to have such a mother-in-law. She heard countless stories from her close friend Heather, who was constantly tormented by her husband's mother, and all she could do was sigh in disbelief. "Just imagine," Heather said, her eyes wide with indignation, "my mother-in-law used to visit us unannounced as a surprise. And as soon as she entered the house, she would immediately check if the rooms were clean. She even used a white tissue to check under the bed, If she found even a speck of dust, she would run up to me, pointing her finger in my face and shout, "What a shame! You haven't vacuumed in a year!" And that's not all. Then she would rush into the kitchen to inspect everything, opening the refrigerator and loudly exclaiming, "How old is this soup? Did you make it yesterday? Are you crazy? Tom should only eat fresh food." Heather imitated her mother-in-law in a nasty, high-pitched voice. Despite the overall horror of the situation, it was impossible not to laugh. After that, she would meticulously inspect the bathroom and toilet, making sure the toilet bowl was spotless, the towels were snow white, and then she would check how her beloved Tom's shirts were hung in the closet, making sure that they were properly ironed. Heather continued. "What a nightmare," Connie sighed, relieved in her heart that she was incredibly lucky with her own mother-in-law. Not even in her worst dreams could Connie imagine Florence raising her voice at her or saying anything rude or impolite. Her mother-in-law was always surprisingly delicate and tactful. She never pressured Connie about grandchildren, even though Connie's own mother would constantly bring up the topic. "Connie, when are you and Robert going to have children? It's about time. I want to babysit my grandchildren." At family celebrations and gatherings, numerous relatives, aunts, great-aunts, and grandmothers of distant relatives would also press Connie, without any hesitation in their comments. "Connie, when are you going to get pregnant? You're not getting any younger. How old are you? 27? I already have my third child at your age." Connie always forced a smile and mumbled some unintelligible response. Questions about when she and her husband would have children always hurt her. It had been 5 years since their wedding day, and there were still no children. And it wasn't because they didn't want them. They did. They just couldn't. Every month Connie prayed that this time it would work, but she was always disappointed. After numerous tests and examinations, she was diagnosed with a rather serious condition that made it impossible for her to conceive. Connie was afraid that Robert would leave her, that one day she would become a burden to him, and that he would want his own child from another healthy woman. Of course, her husband reassured her that he loved her more than anything, and that having children, or not, didn't matter to him. However, Connie felt insecure and considered herself an inferior woman. Connie's mother-in-law, Florence, was a model of tact. She affectionately inquired after Connie's well-being, but never intruded with her innermost thoughts or made any inappropriate remarks, unsolicited advice, or uncomfortable questions. For this, Connie had a great respect and appreciation for her mother-in-law. She had never encountered a more benevolent and honourable person, and it seemed that Florence referred to Connie as her own daughter and always cared for her as much as she did for her own son. Whenever Robert and Connie visited her, Florence greeted them with a warm smile and a table filled with delicious food. However, in the past months, Connie noticed that the woman, while still setting the table as usual, appeared incredibly fatigued and worn out, as if cooking had drained all her energy. "Florence," Connie said to her, "you don't have to work so hard for us. Standing at the stove for half the day tires you out. Don't make such sacrifices. Next time, please allow us to buy something for tea, and that'll be sufficient." The mother-in-law smiled faintly. "Connie, I feel perfectly fine. It brings me so much joy to treat you and Robert to something delicious." Robert also noticed that something was amiss with his mother. Mum had lost a lot of weight. He shared his observations with Connie. "Have you noticed it too? She insists everything is fine, while she looks exhausted and unwell." "That's just like Mum," Robert sighed. "She never admits when she's not feeling well or in pain." "Maybe she should get a checkup," Connie suggested, "to check her blood, heart and other internal organs, just to be safe. I hope there's nothing serious going on with her, but it wouldn't hurt to be cautious." "Perhaps she's simply exhausted. We should arrange a trip to the seaside for her. It's been so long since she last took a vacation," Robert proposed. "Good idea," Connie nodded. However, when Florence heard about the plan to send her to the sea, she resisted and weakly argued, "Oh, are you crazy? I'm not going anywhere. I have my garden, my chickens and my cat. They all depend on me. Who will take care of them if I leave?" "Don't worry, we'll take care of your vegetable garden and animals," Robert reassured her. "I'll drop by after work. Connie will help, and if needed, we can ask your neighbour to help." Florence's neighbour was a young girl in her early 20s named Julie. She was an orphan who had been raised by her grandparents, and they had passed away a year ago, leaving her all alone. Julie occasionally visited Florence to assist her or simply have a chat. Julie won't refuse to help. Florence's face brightened upon hearing about her neighbour. "I'll talk to her. If she agrees, then I'll go to the seaside." To be frank, Connie didn't particularly like her mother-in-law's neighbour. The girl always smiled timidly and shyly, behaving like an uncomplaining sheep. But deep in her heart, Connie knew what bothered her the most about the neighbour. It wasn't her modesty or her doll-like face with submissive eyes. Connie suspected that Julie had been hopelessly in love with Robert for a long time. Once, she shared her suspicions with her husband, but he only snorted derisively. "Who? Julie? Come on, what love is there? I remember her as a snotty little girl, always following me when I went out with the boys. She's 10 years younger than me. I never thought of her as a girl, more like a little sister." Connie pressed her lips together and said nothing, but she thought to herself that Julie's childhood was over long ago, and she was no longer a teenager, but an adult pretty woman. However, Connie had no reason not to trust her husband. If he said that he did not perceive Julie as a girl, then it must be true. Florence was delighted with the seaside vacation. "What a turquoise and clear sea in the morning. It's so gentle and warm. The grapes, straight from the bush, are incredibly tasty, and the ripe peaches are so juicy. The wave brings such beautiful shells to the shore." The woman shared her joy when Connie and Robert called her. "It seems the trip did your mother good," Connie remarked with a smile. Even through the video link, you can see that her face is literally glowing with happiness. She looks fresher and more beautiful. "Well, I told you that everything would get better if she just got some good rest," Robert confirmed with satisfaction. On the eve of her mother-in-law's arrival, Connie decided to clean the house. Florence hadn't requested it, but of course it was much nicer to come back to a clean house. When Connie opened the door, with the spare set of keys, she discovered that everything inside had been cleaned. And there was not just clean, but sparkling clean in the house. The doormats were washed and fresh. The furniture surfaces were free of any dust. In the kitchen the dishes sparkled. The tablecloth was starched and crisp, and the bed linen was snow white, ironed and fragrant with a refreshing conditioner. Connie looked at all this in amazement and immediately answered herself the question of who had done this. Of course, it was Julie. Although she should have been grateful to the girl, Connie felt a slight irritation. Why is she trying so hard, as if she wants to please Florence? She thought with annoyance. Robert is already taken away. Does she hope that one day he will pay her any attention? Connie went out into the yard to check on the chickens. Everything was in order. The birds were fed and watered. And in the vegetable garden, everything was well maintained with no weeds. Even the beds had been watered. Against her will, Connie felt another twinge of irritation. Look how diligent Julie is. She is like a fairy. Subconsciously, Connie didn't fully trust the girl, as she sensed a sneering squint behind her meek gaze and huge blue eyes. However, she was still grateful for her help. To meet Florence at the airport, Connie and Robert went together and carefully searched for a familiar, slim figure in the crowd of arrivals. "There she is!" Connie exclaimed joyfully, being the first to spot Florence, and waved her hand. The woman approached them with a smile, pulling her small, wheeled suitcase behind her. Robert and Connie rushed to hug and kiss her. And then something terrible happened right before their eyes. Florence suddenly groaned and turned pale and before Robert could react, she slowly collapsed to the floor like a lifeless doll. Robert rushed to his mother and managed to catch her just in time before she hit the ground. As soon as possible, Florence was delivered to the hospital. "Robert, I'm fine," his mother reassured him in a weak voice lying on a stretcher. "Just fatigue, a change of climate, it'll pass. Take me home, please." "Oh no," Connie and Robert objected in unison. "No home, until we know exactly what's happening to you. We're not going home." A series of endless tests and examinations dragged on. Connie was afraid of something serious, but she did not admit it to Robert so as not to worry him in vain. However, the diagnosis still sounded like a thunderclap to both of them. "I'm sorry," the doctor said, turning to Robert. "Your mother has cancer." "Cancer?" He questioned the man inanely and squeezed Connie's palm harder, as if he were looking to her for protection. "Mum has cancer? That means she's going to die?" "What are you saying, Robert?" Connie was as shocked as her husband. "Cancer is not a verdict, is it?" She turned to the doctor for support. The doctor shrugged his shoulders uncertainly, apparently not wanting to reassure in vain, but he wasn't going to scare her in vain either. "There's always a chance," he said evasively. "Surgery, chemotherapy. I assure you we'll do our best, but unfortunately it's not always up to us." After the doctors leaving the couple, Connie said, "We should probably stop by Florence's house and get some things for her for the hospital. You know, a change of underwear, a robe, slippers, a toothbrush, a comb, and so on." "Yes, of course," Robert nodded. "Let's get going now. You'll help me pack everything so I don't forget anything." At Florence's house, Connie quickly found the required items and put them in a bag. Her husband had been sitting on a stool in the kitchen all this time, staring blankly at the wall. "I don't believe Mum can die," he said at last. His lips quivered like a hurt child's. "I don't want her to die." Connie rushed to her husband and hugged him tightly, pressing his head against her breast. "She won't die," she whispered fervently, covering his tear-stained cheeks with kisses. "She'll get help. Surgery will fix everything. I believe it." And her husband continued to shake with silent sobs. "Connie, I can't go to her today. I'll burst into tears as soon as I look at her. Couldn't you bring her things yourself? I'm afraid today. Today I can't stand it, and I'll ruin everything. I need some time to realize everything." "Of course, darling," Connie nodded. "I'll go to the hospital myself. You really need to calm down a bit and come to your senses." "Thank you, Connie," he said, pressing her palms to his lips. "What would I do without you?" She picked up the bag of belongings and inquired, "Are you going home now?" Robert shook his head slowly. "No, I want to sit here in my mum's alone for a while and think about everything. I need this, Connie, just to be alone for a while and process everything." "Of course," she said softly. "I understand. Stay here as long as you need to. I'll go straight home after the hospital and wait for you there. Call me if you need anything." If Connie could have known what would happen at her mother-in-law's house after she left, she would never have left Robert alone. The mother-in-law tried to remain calm. "There's no need to worry. The doctors are very experienced here and have a golden hand," Connie assured her, putting on an overly cheerful tone. "They'll operate and you'll be as good as new. Here are your things for now, and if needed I'll bring more." Florence asked weakly, "Where's Robert?" "He had to rush away on business. He promised to come and see you tomorrow," Connie lied. "Now try to rest and get some sleep. Tomorrow both Robert and I will definitely come and bring you something delicious." When Connie returned home, her husband still hadn't arrived. He was probably still at his mother's house. The woman didn't bother him with calls, deciding to prepare something tasty and nutritious for her mother-in-law. The hospital provided food, of course, but it couldn't compare to home-cooked meals. As Connie worked in the kitchen, washing, peeling and cutting vegetables, and cooking chicken broth, time flew by, and her worries subsided. However, evening came, dinner was ready, and Robert still hadn't returned. Connie hesitated and sent him a message. "Where are you?" He didn't immediately respond. "I'm still at my mum's house." "Should I expect you for dinner?" The message was read, but this time Robert remained silent for a very, very long time. Finally he wrote, "I want to stay here for now. Have dinner and go to bed without me. I'll be home late. Good night." Trying not to show her disappointment, Connie wished him a good night too and sighed. She didn't feel like eating alone. She tossed and turned in bed for a long time, feeling its emptiness and coldness without her husband. Sleep finally washed over her. Connie fell into a deep slumber and only woke up when she heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. She jumped out of bed. But what time is it? Connie looked at the clock and couldn't contain her surprise. Wow, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So Robert didn't sleep at home at all tonight. Quickly throwing on a silk robe, Connie rushed out to meet him and was shocked by what she saw. Robert reeked of alcohol from meters away, and he could barely stand on his feet, staggering and clutching onto the walls. Connie had never seen her husband in such a state, and it left her incredibly confused. Avoiding eye contact, Robert apologized. I'm sorry, Connie. I don't know how it happened." And suddenly broke down, sliding down the wall to the floor and covering his face with his hands. Connie gently stroked his dishevelled hair. "Did you get drunk because of your mum?" she asked in a trembling voice. Robert shook his head. "I'm a scoundrel. I'm a jerk, Connie. I'm unforgivable. A real wretch." "Why are you blaming yourself so hard?" Connie cradled his head against her chest. For a moment it seemed as if her husband's scent was mixed with another woman's perfume, but she quickly dismissed the thought. What nonsense was she thinking? It was probably just her imagination running wild. "Your reaction is natural and understandable. You're worried about your mother." Connie comforted him. "You have nothing to apologize for." But Robert kept sobbing so bitterly and inconsolably that Connie's heart was literally torn with grief. At that time she did not know that the reason for his tears was not his mother's illness, but something else. The mother-in-law's operation was successful, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, Robert had subtly changed since the day he came home drunk. Connie couldn't quite pinpoint these changes, but her husband had really become quite different. At times he seemed like a stranger. It was as if he avoided Connie, avoiding eye contact or guiltily averting his eyes when they did meet. Eventually Connie couldn't bear it any longer. "Why do you look like a delinquent child or a misbehaving cat?" she exclaimed, splashing her hands. "Something has happened." "Nothing's happened. Everything's fine," her husband glumly muttered. "Then why have you become such a stranger?" Connie asked in despair. "I'm afraid to even approach you sometimes." "You're making up nonsense," Robert muttered, turning away again. "I'm the same as I was before. Nothing has changed." Connie knew, however, that it had. Since Robert refused to share his real worries with her, Connie didn't bother prying. She only hoped that everything would gradually work itself out and return to normal. Maybe her beloved Robert would become the same as before. However, over time the changes in her husband worsened. Robert became even more withdrawn, frowning and taciturn. There was a deep wrinkle between his eyebrows. He often seemed to be tormented by something, lost in thought and staring at one point. At one point, Connie feared that Robert was as ill as his mother, so she cautiously started a conversation about his well-being. But in response to her anxious inquiries, her husband only snapped. "I'm well. I'm perfectly healthy. Don't cluck at me like a hen." Connie took offence and even shed a few tears. Robert, of course, immediately came to his senses, pulled her close and buried his face in her hair, just like before. "Forgive me, Connie. I've worn you out." Here he is again, asking for forgiveness. Connie wondered, what is it that oppresses him so? Then she began to notice that Robert was staying late at work more and more often. At first she didn't think much of it, especially since her husband said he had been at his mother's house. Connie had no reason to suspect him of deceit, and yet these frequent visits to his mother started to worry her. She even started feeling again that Robert smelled of someone else's perfume, and it certainly wasn't Florence's perfume. Connie didn't know what to think. Once, despite despising herself for doing so, she dialed her mother-in-law's number and asked how she was doing, inquiring about her health. Then, as if casually, she asked, "By the way, is Robert still at yours?" "Yes," the mother-in-law replied hesitantly. "He's in the vegetable garden now. I asked him to water the flower beds." "Did he water the beds yesterday too?" Connie asked, hesitating a bit. "And the day before yesterday? And 3 days ago? And last week?" "Connie," her mother-in-law said, "did Robert hurt you in some way?" Connie immediately cooled down. She felt deflated like a balloon that had all the air let out. "No," she said. "I'm sorry, I'm just being foolish. Of course Robert didn't hurt me, and I'm glad he's helping you." However, as she hung up, Connie pondered deeply. Maybe I should go to my mother-in-law's house myself to see for sure that everything is all right, that Robert is really just helping his mother and not involved with another woman. And so she did. Connie convinced herself that she was only going to see Florence, but deep down she knew that she wanted to make sure her husband and his mother weren't deceiving her. Robert was indeed at his mother's, and Connie witnessed an idyllic scene of a peaceful tea party at her mother-in-law's house. At the table sat Florence herself, Julie, and Robert. At the sight of Connie, all three of them looked embarrassed, as if Connie had witnessed something obscene. Florence tried to overcome from the awkwardness by fussing and chatting lively. Julie lowered her head, pretending to be deeply engrossed in her teacup. As for Robert, he first turned pale, then red, before finally exhaling and asking, "What are you doing here?" Connie, feeling pathetic and confused, retorted, "I stopped by to see how Florence's health is. Do I not have the right to do so?" "Yes, of course you do, Connie," exclaimed the mother-in-law. "My home is your home. You know that very well." However, at the moment, Connie felt like an unwanted and unwelcome guest in this home. "Well, I should probably go home," Julie said meekly and sheepishly as she quickly stood up from the table. No one tried to stop her, and as Julie passed by Connie, she caught a familiar scent. "Isn't that the perfume that has been lingering around Robert lately? Oh, I'm just being paranoid." Connie silently fumed at herself for suspecting her husband of being involved with that woman. It was ridiculous. After Julie left, the atmosphere became even more unbearable. All three of them, the mother-in-law, Robert and Connie, felt awkward and constrained. Time was passing, week after week, month after month. Florence had to undergo regular examinations at a clinic to prevent a relapse. It was during one of these examinations that they received the devastating news that the disease had returned. It hadn't gone away. It had only been lurking and had now struck with renewed vigour, affecting other organs. The sight of Robert was heartbreaking, and Connie could barely hold back her tears upon hearing the doctor's verdict. "This time there is no hope. Prepare yourselves. It's a matter of a couple of months, at most 6. Telling her mother-in-law was the hardest part, but as it turned out, she had already figured it out. There was nothing to be done except for palliative therapy, to alleviate some of the suffering, but not to cure the woman. The misfortune brought Connie and Robert closer together. Robert sought her support once again, trying to be present for her, and he stopped staying late at work or disappearing in the evenings. Together, they surrounded the sick woman with love and care, and also hired a nurse to take care of Florence around the clock. "Forgive me, Connie," the mother-in-law said, not long before she died, when she was so weak that she could barely move her lips. Connie never understood what she was apologizing for. The funeral had an unexpectedly large number of people. Plenty of warm words were spoken about her, and many people cried sincerely. It was strange that the obliging Julie, who often spent time with Florence, was not among the mourners. She usually hung around, and now she didn't even come to the funeral. They decided to hold a wake in Florence's house. Connie looked at her mother-in-law's photo in the funeral frame and rushed out of the room into the kitchen, trying to hold back tears. In the kitchen, two neighbouring women, Mrs. Goncalves and Mrs. Basie, were engaged in their usual gossip. They didn't notice Connie, who slowed her steps. Suddenly she heard that they were speaking about Robert and Julie. "Thank God she had the conscience not to attend the funeral," Mrs. Basie whispered loudly. "What a snake Julie turned out to be, and she pretended to be so innocent." "It was Florence's own fault. She's been spoiling her too much," Clara said, speaking in a loud whisper. "That quiet girl had always been around Robert ever since she was a child. She was always making eyes at him, but Florence didn't seem to notice anything. Julie was like a saint to her." "On the other hand, Florence can be understood," Mrs. Basie said. "She wanted grandchildren for a long time, and her daughter-in-law turned out to be unable to give her a grandson or a granddaughter." "Yes, she is really unlucky," Mrs. Goncalves said. "Of course, Connie is a good woman. She's courteous, kind, but she's empty. And what man would last long with a barren woman? So Robert couldn't stand it." Connie pressed her palms to her mouth. "Robert couldn't stand to be near her? He is here in the room sitting at the table. He hasn't gone anywhere." "But still, taking a man away from his wife is the most miserable thing," Mrs. Basie said with indignation. "How did that wretch woman manage to pull it off? Robert had never paid attention to her since his childhood." "Who knows? She could get him drunk and seduce him. Those meek-looking quiet ones are actually impudent lechers. Oh, I felt that behind this angelic Julie's appearance the devil was hiding." Connie was about to burst into the kitchen and resolutely stop that vile gossip about her husband's infidelity, but at that very moment a phrase sounded that made her freeze. "And look, what an injustice! Connie can't get pregnant for a long time, and Julie has had twins." Connie clasped her mouth with her palm in shock, holding back the scream that was bursting out of her mouth. "Twins? Who's having twins? Is that quiet Julie?" "But they turned out so cute, so sweet," Mrs. Basie said with a sigh. "They look so much like their daddy, but just like 2 drops of water." "Yes, the boy and the girl look just like Robert," Mrs. Goncalves confirmed. "I can see why Florence was so happy. She had grandchildren. No matter how well she treats Connie, her own grandchildren will be closer and dearer than the best daughter-in-law. By the way, have you seen Robert? He's completely worn out. His face has darkened. Of course he lost his mother. Such grief. But he's so gloomy because of his children born out of marriage. It's obvious that he loves his wife, but on the other hand can't leave his children. He loves them too. They're his own blood." She continued to stand with her palm pressed to her mouth, so as not to give herself away by a careless cry or a groan. How painful and sickening it was for her. The truth that had been revealed to her was terrible. It was as if the blinders had fallen from Connie's eyes. She instantly realized the reason for her husband's frequent delays. All those long months, Robert had been deceiving her in cold blood. All this time, he had a mistress on the side, and not just any mistress, but one who had given him what Connie had never been able to give him. I wonder how old his little ones are now, Connie pondered in slow motion. And when did he and Julie start dating? The woman was sure that Robert had been involved with Julie after he had learned of his mother's illness. It was then that he'd changed somehow, cooled toward his wife. Well, so his kids are no more than a few months old now, because they found out about their mother-in-law's diagnosis a little more than a year ago. I wonder if he is ever going to tell me about them, or was he planning to lead a double life like this? Connie suddenly realised that Robert could leave her at any moment. And really, what was keeping him around? A sense of duty? Friendly affection? A long-standing habit? But love must be long gone, because if he truly loved Connie, he could never have had an affair with another woman. And now he has nothing to keep him. In that other family he has the main thing, his daughter and son, if you believe the chatter of the gossiping neighbours. Does that mean everyone knows? Connie felt a burning shame at the thought. God, what a shame. All the neighbours know. Everyone saw Robert go to Julie's house, and everyone saw her with her belly, and then with the babies. And yet these people looked into my eyes, smiled at me, said hello to me, and asked me how I was doing. But they were probably quietly whispering and laughing at me. God, what a fool I was. A blind, naive fool. And my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, she also knew. She knew and kept silent. She treated me affectionately, behaved as if nothing had happened, and yet she ran to her son's mistress to babysit her long-awaited grandchildren. The information that fell on Connie literally crushed the young woman. She did not know how she would be able to return to the living room and look people, especially her husband, in the eyes. It was unbearable. Did I deserve this? Haven't I suffered enough? I have become a laughingstock. Connie entered the kitchen and put the dirty plates she had in her hands into the sink. Paying no attention to Mrs. Goncalves and Mrs. Basie, quickly they stopped gossiping. Connie, you must be tired, my dear. Sit down and rest. I'll wash all the dishes myself. Yes, Mrs. Basie added. Rest, you're so tired today. Oh, yes, Connie thought unhappily. I'm really exhausted. She suddenly realised that she couldn't stay in this house for another second. The walls, the atmosphere of the wake, the shadow of the dead mother-in-law, the betrayal of her husband, and the all-knowing neighbours. She wanted to crawl into her house, hide from everyone, and cry out her pain. For a second, the thought flashed into her mind to go into Julie's house, to look into the eyes of that false prude, and at the same time to look at Robert's children, to see whether they really resembled him, as the neighbours said. But Connie immediately rejected the idea, afraid that when she looked at the faces of the little ones, her heart would immediately burst with grief into a million pieces. She straightened up and entered the living room, where the memorial meal was going on. At the sight of her, Robert perked up. Connie, where have you been? He asked pitifully. Sit down. Sit with me. I'm empty and cold without you. For a few moments, Connie stared inquisitively into his eyes, trying to understand, how is this possible? How is it possible to look into the eyes of your wife, assure her that it's bad without her, and a few hours later look into the eyes of your mistress? Kissing her, hugging her, burying your lips in the sweet-smelling tops of your children's heads? She'd never realised Robert was such a duplicitous person. God, how she hated him at that moment. She wanted to claw at his face with her nails and scratch him bloody, to spit into his shameless eyes, to scream, "Why are you doing this to me?" Of course, Connie did not do any of that. She only nodded coldly at him and smiled demurely. Sorry, Robert. I'll probably go home, she said in an even voice. I'm terribly tired and exhausted. I have a headache. I want to take a pill and lie in silence. You'll manage without me, won't you? Yes, Robert nodded confusedly. Yes, of course. Rest, don't worry about anything. The neighbours will help with everything here. Especially one neighbour, Connie thought with bitter irony, but said in other words, You can sleep here tonight if you want. With your mistress and children, she'll be glad, she finished mentally. But her husband shook his head fearfully. No, I don't want to be here. I want to be with you. I'll definitely come home tonight. You should have come back earlier, Connie thought bitterly. Now it's too late. It won't change or fix anything anyway. Well, in any case, she still had time to be alone, to recover a little and think things over. She had to decide how to proceed, how to live on. Once home, Connie finally let her tears flow. They rolled and rolled down her cheeks, not wanting to stop, and Connie cried inconsolably for an hour. She felt like an unnecessary, discarded thing, which her husband used and threw away without regret, replacing it with another, newer one. Although he hadn't even thrown her away yet, Robert was still maintaining the visibility that he and Connie were a family. But she knew it was all an illusion, a lie. Connie realised that Julie was far from stupid. It was unlikely that she would openly tell Robert to leave his wife and move in with her and his children, but Connie also realised that sooner or later Robert would inevitably think about leaving. What does he have on one side of the scale? A wife, familiar in every detail, not too young and barren, and on the other side, a young, beautiful mother of his children. Robert's leaving was a matter of time. So after much agonising deliberation, Connie made a difficult, but as it seemed to her, the only right decision. She must free Robert and untie his hands. Connie was going to wait for him to leave her, but she decided to leave on her own. In a matter of minutes, she threw her things into a suitcase. Fearing to be caught unawares, Connie hurriedly scribbled a farewell note to her husband. Before leaving the apartment where she and Robert had lived for so many happy years, Connie lingered on the threshold and looked back. There was a pinch in her chest, and a bitter lump rolled down her throat. Taking a deep breath, the woman pushed open the door. She had no idea where to go now, planning to spend the night in some hotel, and then she would see. Maybe she'd go to her parents' or a friend's apartment. But she couldn't go to them. Robert would look for her there first, and she didn't want him to find her. Not now, anyway. Her wound was too fresh for Connie to be able to look her almost ex-husband in the eye. Some day they would talk, and perhaps she would even try to understand him, but not now. When Robert finally came home 5 hours later, he found an empty apartment and a note on the kitchen table. I know about you and Julie, and about your children too. You and I should break up. There's no other way out. Please, Robert, don't try to contact me. I'm not ready to see you yet. Don't torture yourself or me. I'll file for divorce myself and you'll get the notice. I sincerely wish you happiness in your new family. Not yours any more. Connie. 3 years later. All this time, Connie was quite a self-sufficient person. She was almost never bored alone. She easily found something to do. Read a book, go for a walk, go to the theatre or cinema, or go to a cosy coffee shop to drink a cup of her favourite cappuccino. She did not hesitate to do it alone, although many of her acquaintances embarrassedly admitted that they were uncomfortable going to public places without company. If you come to the theatre or a restaurant alone, they may think that you do not need anyone at all, her colleague Bella once told her. What a silly thing to say. Connie was indignant. I go alone because I'm not bored alone. Who cares if I have company or not? These are outdated notions. And yet these notions work, Bella objected with conviction. If, for example, you come to the bar in the company of girlfriends, or alone, most likely men will pay attention to the company, and not to a single girl. That's really nonsense, Connie snorted. Besides, Maybe I don't want men paying attention to me. Maybe I just came to the bar to have a drink and have fun after a hard day." "Oh, you're being sly, Connie," Bella said, squinting her eyes. "Every woman wants to find Mr. Right. No one wants to be alone." Connie said tiredly, "You and I are speaking different languages. I'm afraid you'll never understand me." In fact, of course, Connie didn't make loneliness a priority and didn't make it the purpose and meaning of her life. But she was endlessly annoyed by these outdated but still socially imposed notions. A woman without a man is incomplete. She has to attract someone to make a couple, and even if it's not a good man, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that she is not alone. After her divorce, Connie made several attempts to start a new relationship. She met men at work, on dating sites, at the theatre or in cafes. Sometimes she even went on dates, but they always ended up in failure. It wasn't because the men were bad, but because Connie couldn't help but compare them to her ex-husband Robert, and every time the comparison was not in favour of the new suitors. She couldn't find that same level of compatibility with any other man. Since leaving home 3 years ago, Robert had repeatedly tried to meet and speak with Connie, but every time she managed to avoid the meetings. "I want a divorce and that's it," she would repeat adamantly. "I don't need anything else from you. Don't call me, please. Just leave me alone forever." Finally, after losing all hope, Robert gave up and agreed to the divorce. He probably realised that Connie would never forgive him. They met only once more, when they went to get the divorce certificate. Connie avoided looking at her now ex-husband. She was afraid that she might break down, throw herself at him and cry. Robert glanced at her, and after receiving the divorce certificate, made a timid attempt to speak. "Connie," he began hesitantly, "I miss you." "Stop it," she quickly interrupted. "Robert, please don't. You and I are divorced. From this date forward, we are strangers. Outsiders." Robert lowered his head, and his gaze faded. "As you wish. Be happy." With those words he walked away, without looking back. For 3 years, Connie heard nothing about Robert, and didn't make any efforts to find out. However, she had no doubt that Robert was now happy with his new wife and their 2 children. Connie changed jobs and rented an apartment on the other side of the city to avoid any accidental encounters with the past. However, she couldn't have foreseen that the past would eventually catch up with her. On a gloomy fall day, Connie decided to go shopping to lift her spirits. Lately she had been feeling irritable and tearful, perhaps due to a seasonal vitamin deficiency. And even her best friend Heather sometimes offended her, saying hurtful things without realising it. For instance, they had been trying to meet up for weeks, but Heather kept postponing and rescheduling the meeting, first from Friday to Saturday, then to Sunday, and so on. "Listen," Connie couldn't take it anymore. "Let's decide. I shouldn't have to cancel my plans every time and adjust to a time that suits you." "What's there to adjust?" Heather said it dismissively. "You don't have kids. You can go out at any moment. But I need to plan everything, from picking up the kids from kindergarten and school, checking their homework and feeding them. You have no idea how much mothers have to take care of." "I can't even imagine." "You're right," Connie confirmed quietly, and Heather didn't even realise that she had thoughtlessly blurted out something tactless, inadvertently offending her best friend. Walking around the mall, Connie suddenly heard crying and slowed her pace and listened. She turned her head around, trying to locate the source of the sound. Just a few metres away from the food court, a little girl was crying bitterly. She was about 3 years old. Her blonde curls were dishevelled, her pigtails were undone, and her ribbons were helplessly tangled and hanging down. Connie looked around, searching for the girl's parents. No one paid attention to the girl. It was clear she was all alone. Perhaps she had gotten lost. Determined, Connie walked towards the girl and squatted in front of her. "Hey," she said tenderly, "why are you crying?" The girl wiped her tears with her tiny fists, revealing her red, wrinkled face. She looked up from under her brow and sobbed. "I'm lost." The mall was huge, filled with countless people. It was no wonder the little girl had become confused and frightened. "Did you come here with your parents?" Connie asked. The girl continued to regard her warily. "Daddy says I shouldn't talk to strangers," she finally stated. "Your daddy is absolutely right," Connie nodded. "So let's get to know each other right away. My name is Connie. What's your name?" "Amy," the girl replied. Connie couldn't help but smile. "So, Amy, what happened? Where are your mum and dad? Didn't you come here with them?" "No," the girl shook her head. "I came here with my daddy and my brother Marty." "All right. So you came here with your dad and brother. Where are they now?" Connie continued to ask leading questions. "Marty had to use the restroom," the little girl explained innocently. "Daddy took him there and told me to wait here." "How long have you been waiting?" The little girl nodded with a sad sigh. Her face displayed genuine sadness mixed with panic. "It's been a while. Maybe they forgot about me and went home?" Connie shook her head. "I don't think so. How could they forget about such a beautiful and sweet girl like you? I'm sure they'll be back soon." Amy sniffled and immediately brightened up. "Your pigtails are loose," Connie said. "Why don't you let me fix them for you?" The little girl shook her head. "Daddy can't braid them properly," she said carefully. "He just doesn't know how." "Oh, so it's your daddy who does your hair. What about Mummy?" The little girl looked at Connie with a serious and sad expression. "Mummy is dead," she said. "Oh my goodness," Connie gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." The little girl let out a deep sigh. "I want Santa Claus to give me and Marty a new mother for my new year. Daddy says it doesn't work that way and that he can only give me a toy, but I hope anyway," she fervently and convincingly added, clasping her hands to her chest. "Okay," Connie nodded with a sigh. "Let's think about how we can find your daddy. You don't have a cell phone, of course?" "No," Amy waved her hands. "Dad says I'm too young." "Well, that makes sense. And you don't know his cell phone number, I assume?" The girl shook her head. "All right. At least, do you remember your name?" "I said my name is Amy." The little girl furrowed her brow in frustration, as if annoyed by Connie's lack of understanding. "No, I mean in full. First name, last name." I'm Amy Chase." Connie shuddered involuntarily. It had once been her last name too. "And what's your daddy's name?" "Robert." Connie couldn't believe her ears. Was it a coincidence? How many Robert Chases were there in the world? She gazed inquisitively into the girl's face, trying to catch a glimpse of her ex-husband's features, and was horrified to find them. The same cut of the eyes, the same curve of the eyebrows, the same shape of the nose, and the same pattern of the lips. One had to be blind not to notice the obvious resemblance at first sight. "And your brother Marty?" Connie asked in a suddenly grey voice. "Is he the same age as you?" "Yes," Amy nodded proudly. "We have a birthday on the same day. We're twins." But as soon as Connie regained her composure, an excited voice sounded nearby, a voice she wouldn't mistake for anyone else's. "Connie, is it you?" Still squatting in front of the little girl, the woman slowly lifted her head and locked eyes with the eyes she could recognize from a million others. "Hello, Robert," Connie said softly, standing up. "Daddy, I knew you would find me!" Amy exclaimed with joy, throwing herself into his arms. "Amy, I told you not to leave the bench where Marty and I left you," Robert reproached, his gaze fixed on Connie. The little girl frowned.
I got bored. I went to see the aquarium and then I got lost and forgot where my bench was. I tried to find it and got lost. It's not my fault." She pouted playfully. "Connie told me you would come, and you did." Robert continued to stare at Connie as if he couldn't get enough of her. She felt uncomfortable under his intense gaze. To conceal her embarrassment, she coughed and spoke softly. "Amy told me about Julie. I'm so sorry. Please accept my condolences." Robert responded in a calm, emotionless voice. "I'm sorry for the children who are without a mother." "But you're also without a wife," Connie hesitantly reminded him. Robert shook his head and spoke slowly, looking directly into Connie's eyes. "Julie and I were never married." Connie caught her breath. "Why?" she asked, although it was none of her business. After all, why did she care why they hadn't got married? Many families simply live like that. The important thing is that he accepted the children. "Because I didn't want to marry her, and I never loved her," Robert said firmly. "But then how?" Connie swallowed a lump in her throat and glanced at the twins, who were already happily chatting and laughing with each other. Robert nervously ran his fingers through his thick hair, ruffling them. "Look, this will be a long conversation," he said. "I could have explained everything to you back then, but you never wanted to listen." And indeed, 3 years ago, Connie had refused to hear any explanations. She had simply run away from the cruel and hurtful truth. But enough time had passed, and she wasn't hurting as much anymore. Timidly, she nodded to her ex-husband. If you still want to tell me the truth, then I'm ready." 10 minutes later, Amy and Marty were already sitting at one of the food court tables devouring French fries, pizza, and nuggets with great gusto, chatting excitedly. Robert and Connie sat at a nearby table. They hadn't ordered any food as they couldn't swallow a bite. "So," Robert nervously clenched and unclenched his fingers, "where should I start?" "Start from the beginning?" Connie grinned wryly. "When did you and Julie start your relationship?" "There was no relationship." Robert said it sharply and angrily. "There never was. All we had was one single night. It was a drunken mistake and I still regret it. Of course, I don't regret having children, but I'll never forgive myself for sleeping with Julie. I didn't want that." "If you didn't want to, then you wouldn't have slept with her." Connie couldn't resist a venomous retort. "Without desire, it's purely physiologically impossible." "But that night, I thought it was you with me." Connie felt as if she had been stabbed in the chest. "Why do you do that to me?" she exclaimed. "It hurts, Robert." Her ex-husband firmly grasped her palms and squeezed them tightly. "But I'm not lying. It's the pure truth. I stayed at my mum's house that night. You went to our apartment. I was so messed up, I wanted to scream and climb the walls out of grief. I decided to get drunk, and I did. I found a sealed bottle of whiskey in the cardboard, opened it, and drank like a beast. I just wanted to fall into a drunken sleep, and then wake up and find that nothing bad had happened, and that my mother's illness was just a bad dream. I did fall asleep for a while, and when I woke up, I found a naked woman's body pressed against me. I thought it was you." "Was it Julie?" Connie asked, although it was unbearable to hear about this. "Julie," Robert nodded. "But I only found out in the morning. I was too drunk. The room was too dark, and she was silent, not saying a word. She just touched me, kissed me, and pressed herself against me, all the while not saying anything. I immediately responded to her caresses. I thought I was with you, Connie," he added bitterly. Connie swallowed back the tears that welled up in her throat and quietly asked, How did she enter the house?" "She had a spare set of keys." Robert waved it off. "Mum left them for her when she went to the sea, and then forgot to take them back. Julie knew I was there, and she also saw that you had left. She took the chance."
She came in, saw that I had fallen into a drunken slumber, undressed, and she lay down with me. The rest was a matter of technique. He grinned bitterly. I was waiting for you then, she said with difficulty. I waited all night. I didn't want to go to bed without you. And you were in bed with another woman. Robert pleaded with his eyes as he looked at her. Connie, believe me, when morning came and I finally saw who was lying next to me, I almost lost my mind. I hated myself for it. I was ashamed to look you in the eye. I knew that if you found out you'd never forgive me, especially since you always said that Julie had something for me. And I was really a fool, and I didn't believe. Honestly, I was ready to crawl on my knees in front of you, kiss your feet and beg for forgiveness. It was so scary to tell you what happened. I was trying to find the right moment. In short, I just chickened out, he added in despair. And 3 weeks later, the radiant Julie informed me that she had taken a pregnancy test, and it was positive. Robert finished weakly, lowering his head. Connie was at a loss for words. The situation before her was entirely different from what she had imagined. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but the circumstances had changed. Robert hadn't intentionally deceived her. It had simply happened. Somehow, she felt certain that her ex-husband was telling the truth, and everything had happened exactly as he had described. Meanwhile, Robert continued his sombre narrative. There could be nothing between us except for that one night. Of course, I wasn't going to abandon my children. I promised to provide financial support and help with their upbringing. I supported Julie during her pregnancy, taking her to doctors, buying medication and vitamins, and helping with the baby's things. She needed a special stroller and a larger crib. It's ironic. I had always dreamed of having children, but it wasn't the woman I loved who gave birth to them. And yet, I still love her, Robert added quietly. Connie lowered her head, trying to hide her tears. And your mother? When did she find out? She asked. Almost immediately, Robert admitted with a sigh. How could Julie hide it? We lived in neighbouring houses. She soon noticed that I was going to see Julie, taking her somewhere and bringing her back. At first she thought I was having an affair. She gave me a hard time. My mum was so fond of you. She was ready to kill me for betraying you. I had to tell her the truth and ask her not to report me. Mum kept saying that you didn't deserve this. Connie remembered. She asked for my forgiveness before she died. Now I understand why. I was a fool, Robert exclaimed, gripping his head with his hands. I should have told you everything myself, instead of waiting for others to spill the truth. That's how it ended up. You found out the truth at my mother's funeral, didn't you? One of the neighbours let it slip, right? It was bound to come out sooner or later. The truth can't be hidden. I kept silent because I was terrified of losing you. And in the end, I lost you anyway. Connie looked at her ex-husband with bitterness, her heart filled with pain and pity. God, I loved him so much before. And it appears that this feeling hasn't completely died within me. Yes, Robert is to blame. He bears a lot of responsibility. But I am also at fault. I didn't want to hear his explanation. I just disappeared from his life. Who did I end up hurting? Only myself. And who benefited? No one. Because Robert never found happiness without her. What happened to Julie? Connie cautiously asked. She was in a car accident. Robert explained briefly. She had just gotten her driver's license and wasn't very confident yet. She lost control of the car in the rain. Thank God the kids weren't with her. How old were they at the time? Connie inquired. Barely a year old. They certainly don't remember their mother. As if realising the conversation was about her and Marty, Amy looked at her father and smiled reproachfully. Dad, are we going to get ice cream? You promised. Ice cream will be waiting at home, Robert said firmly, instantly transforming into a caring father. You and Marty should be taking your afternoon nap by now. You'll get your ice cream when you wake up." The girl clapped her hands, then looked at Connie. "Can Connie come to us too?" the little girl added. Robert stared at his ex-wife as if his fate relied on her answer. "We have to ask Connie," he finally croaked. "Will you come with us?" Amy asked earnestly. "Please, we have tasty ice cream at home." Connie finally managed to speak. "It depends," she said slowly. "Do you have ice cream in a waffle cone at home? It's my favourite, and I can't do without it." Yes, we have it. Daddy loves it too. He always buys it," Amy exclaimed. "Well then," Connie smiled, "I will happily come to you." That Christmas, little Amy's wish came true. Santa Claus gave her and her brother Marty a new mother. A wonderful, loving, and caring mum. Because if you believe strongly enough and truly want something, it will eventually come true. Nico considered herself a very happy person. At 23 years old, she had a job she loved, a place to call home, and a wonderful partner. Nico worked as a nurse in a hospital. She loved this profession since she was a child. Medicine had always fascinated her, and initially she had thought about becoming a doctor. However, later she realized that getting into a medical university would be incredibly difficult for her, considering the lack of money for tutors or paid tuition. That's why Nico decided to study to become a nurse. During studying at a nursing school, Nico fell in love for the first time in her life. Her chosen one, Doug, was 3 years older than Nico, and he studied at medical college. He was good-looking, tall, athletic, with slightly curly blonde hair and cheerful green eyes. Doug was the captain of the college sports team and represented the institution in various competitions, so it was no surprise that he was popular with girls. It's difficult to say why Doug chose Nico among his many loyal fans. Later, Nico called this her personal bad luck, but at the beginning she was convinced that she was favoured by destiny. Regardless, towards the end of Nico's second year, Doug asked her out and she agreed. Their relationship was forceful, although more like a friendship. Nico and Doug studied together for the session, spent a long time talking, going for walks, watching movies and going to cafes. In short, they led the ordinary lives of young people who were curious about the world. At that time, Nico lived with her parents and her older brother Tom, and then trouble arrived for them. Nico's grandmother fell ill. Helen was a strict, intelligent, well-read and demanding woman. Recently she lived alone, but Tom and Nico visited her from time to time. But when it became apparent that Helen couldn't physically live alone, the family decided that Nico would take care of her. The thing was, the grandmother always favoured the granddaughter more than her grandson. It was hard to say what had led to such a different attitude to the children, but the fact remained. Besides, Nico was to inherit Helen's wonderful 2-bedroom apartment in the centre of the city too. The will had been written several years ago. The elderly woman only required help with household problems and occasional medical assistance, such as administering medication or calling the doctor. Nico, who was studying to be a nurse, saw this as a perfect opportunity to gain practical experience. The girl agreed with her family's opinion and happily moved to her grandmother's house before the new school year began. As a result, she and Doug couldn't meet as frequently as before. Nico's studies consumed a significant amount of her time. After her classes, she rushed home to heat up food and feed her grandmother, who had difficulty doing so herself. Afterward, Nico would focus on studying for the next day's lessons and preparing for her practical training. Doug also had a heavier workload compared to before. During the summer, he took a job at the city hospital. Due to the shortage of staff, Doug often worked a day shift with the next night shift. This schedule left little opportunity for them to have proper meetings. They had to rely on phone calls and occasional moments to communicate via the internet. But Nico wasn't upset that she had to take care of her grandmother. She had only seen kindness from her throughout her life, and she was sincerely grateful for the will written in her name. However, after a few months of this lifestyle, Doug started to complain. He didn't like that when he had a spare time, he and Nico didn't always have a date. If the grandmother at that time required care, the girl stayed with her. The girl was at a loss as to what to do. On one hand, she couldn't leave her grandmother alone, especially during moments when she was particularly worried about her condition. On the other hand, she understood that Doug was right in some way too. Nico tried her best to balance everything in her life. It reached a point where she started skipping some school classes and sacrificing sleep to be with Doug, take care of her grandmother, and maintain good grades. However, all good things come to an end, and Nico and Doug's romance ended as well. One day, Nico was sent to practice in the department where Doug worked. The girl was happy because today they would work together since he was on duty that day. The girl decided not to tell Doug about this before, so to make a surprise. But there was a surprise for her too. When Nico entered the head nurse's office, she caught Doug kissing her. Angry and hurt, Nico turned and left for the manipulation room. She didn't speak to Doug again and avoided looking in his direction. On the outside, she seemed like a piece of ice, but deep inside, her hurt feelings raged. It was difficult for Nico to endure such betrayal. It was even harder for Nico to accept that her beloved grandmother's life was coming to an end. As a future medical professional, Nico couldn't deny the reality, no matter how much she wished otherwise. Watching her grandmother slowly fade away, Nico realized that the end was near. She even put her studies on hold, explaining the situation to the nursing school administration, and devoted herself to her grandmother at her last hours on earth. When Helen passed away, Nico felt as if a part of her heart and soul had left with her. Of course, life went on, but Nico was in no rush to fall in love again. She had made a permanent decision to spend, if not her entire life, a significant period in solitude to avoid being betrayed. This decision allowed Nico to focus on her studies, pursue her favourite hobbies, rest well, and enjoy life as much as possible, given her circumstances. When Nico graduated from medical school, she secured a job in another city hospital, deliberately avoiding any place where she might run into Doug. Nico enjoyed her job as a nurse, despite the challenging and often underappreciated nature of the work. The young woman always arrived at work in a good mood, with light makeup and a hint of perfume. With her tall, slender figure and well-groomed appearance, she caught the attention of men around her. But alas, the heart of this beauty was as cold as ice. Nico made it clear to numerous potential suitors that she was not interested in affairs. The young woman maintained this stance for several years, until one day she met Ryan. They met purely by chance at the entrance of a hospital. Ryan was there with his mother for an examination and asked Nico for directions to the right room. It turned out that Nico was also going there to get results of the patients in her department. On the way, Nico and Ryan smiled hesitantly at each other, but did not dare to speak. But in front of the door of the office, when the young man's mother had already gone to the appointment, a conversation began between them. Nico felt like she had been searching for a man like Ryan her entire life. He was intelligent, with a sparkling sense of humour, and most importantly, he was a wonderful son. Ryan personally brought his mother to the doctor, even though she wasn't a weak or elderly woman. Nico admired how caring he was, because she remembered perfectly well how Doug reacted when she took care of her grandmother. Ryan took Nico's phone number, and 2 days later they met in the park for a casual walk and to listen to the birds singing. Ryan continued to impress Nico with his knowledge, hobbies and interests. Nico, on the other hand, behaved more modestly. It had been so long since she had been on a real date that sometimes she didn't know what to talk about with Ryan. She had a feeling that he wouldn't call her for a second meeting at any cost. But Nico was wrong. Ryan not only invited her for a second and third date, but he also expressed his desire to be in a committed relationship. He liked Nico's quiet beauty, her few words, her restraint, and her intelligence. It took some time for the young woman to believe in his feelings. She was afraid of repeating the mistakes she made with Doug, so she kept Ryan at a distance while still maintaining a connection. Only after 6 months did Nico start to feel more at ease with Ryan, trusting him and genuinely laughing with him. Ryan noticed the positive changes in their relationship and sincerely enjoyed them. After dating for a little over a year, Ryan casually slipped in a proposal for them to start living together. Nico liked the idea, especially since she had her own apartment. The young couple decided to move in together right away, just in time for the upcoming New Year, a time of miracles and magic. Nico felt like she was living in a Disney princess movie, wanting to sing and dance. Nico hurriedly put on her slippers and went to the kitchen. Ryan would be home from work in 2 hours, and she wanted to prepare a home-cooked roast in clay pots before he arrived. She always tried to impress him with her cooking and housekeeping skills, as she knew that the men appreciated these qualities in girls. Ryan returned from work and immediately hugged and kissed Nico. "Hi, I missed you. And what is that delicious smell? You're my domestic fairy. I think even if you cook something half raw, it will still taste wonderful. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about." "I'm all ears," Nico replied, stirring her cooking in a salad bowl and gesturing for Ryan to sit down and share everything with her. Ryan hesitated for a moment and then began to recount an issue in his family. It turned out that there were constant conflicts between his mother and grandmother. Grandmother, as easy to guess, was his mother's mother-in-law, the mother of his long-deceased father. The two women never found common ground, neither when Ryan's father was alive nor after his death. Grandma Martha was a powerful and stubborn woman, yet calm as a rock. Once she decided to do something, she stood her ground. On the other hand, Ryan's mother, despite her mature years, still disliked Martha's categorical nature and some of her habits. Furthermore, they harboured another family secret, a kind of skeleton in the closet. After Ryan's father passed away, his widow discovered that all the property was not registered in her late husband's name, but in his mother's name. Even the apartment in the city where the family lived before the tragedy belonged to Grandma Martha. This greatly displeased Ryan's mother. Initially, she tried to convince Martha to transfer all the assets to her grandson, arguing that the boy was growing up and should at least have a roof over his head. But Martha calmly responded that she had no intention of evicting anyone. "Live where you lived, but I will remain the owner." Lynette, Ryan's mother, didn't like this, but she couldn't do anything about it. At times she became nervous, crying and shouting that the old woman wanted to leave her and her grandson with nothing. She feared that Martha would suddenly go mad and transfer the living space to a cat shelter, or even leave it to a stranger. The grandmother always dismissed such accusations and told Ryan not to believe his mother regarding this matter. But there was another reason for keeping this apartment in her name. Martha lived outside the city in a small but cosy house, inherited from her own parents. However, getting medical care was a real challenge there. To see a doctor, the elderly woman had to make arrangements in advance with one of the local men to take her to town and then bring her back. Sometimes it took several days for consultations and treatment, so the elderly woman would stay overnight in the apartment in the city, enduring the constant complaints from Lynette that she was embarrassing them. The elderly woman realized that she was an unwelcome guest in the family, but where could she go? Her friends had suggested more than once that she kick out her daughter-in-law, as her grandson was grown up and capable of earning his own money for a place to live. Then she could rent out the empty apartment and use the money to visit town as much as she desired. However, Martha couldn't or didn't want to do that to Ryan, so she continued to tolerate her daughter-in-law's dislike and occasionally spent the night in her own apartment, feeling herself like a stray dog allowed on the doorstep, but at any moment could be chased away with a broom. Shortly before the new year, Grandma Martha fell ill in her village. Concerned neighbours called an ambulance, and she was taken to the hospital in the city. She spent 10 days there, and everything that could be done for her had already been done. As the head of the therapeutic department, where the old woman was treated, said, there was no remedy for old age. The grandmother began to prepare for her discharge. However, she had no way of getting back to her native village. Ryan's car had been parked for a long time awaiting repairs that he couldn't afford now. The neighbours couldn't bring the elderly woman home for their own reasons. So she decided, said Ryan, letting out a particularly sorrowful sigh, to spend a few days in her own apartment and celebrate the new year with Mum. Of course, Ryan's mother strongly objected, and she had her reasons. The main issue was that after the death of her spouse many years ago, she never lived as a hermit. And now she had a serious long-term relationship, and her partner had been living with her for 6 months. They had big plans for a New Year's Eve party, and Martha's presence did not align with them. That's why Ryan decided to ask Nico for a small favour, to have his grandmother stay at her apartment for the New Year's holidays, along with him. This way, they would solve 2 problems. The elderly woman would have a place to stay, and Ryan's mother could spend time with her partner and their guests without any interference. Nico agreed immediately. She was shocked by the fact that Ryan's mother could kick an elderly woman out of her own home, especially on New Year's Eve. She didn't even think about the shamefulness of such an act. However, Nico, being a cultured girl, didn't voice these thoughts aloud. Together with Ryan, they discussed the details of where Grandma Martha would sleep, what she could and couldn't eat from the festive table, her preferences and her intolerances. During this talk, the young woman was surprised to find out that Ryan knew very little about his own grandmother. He didn't know her taste preferences, allergies, or even her specific health conditions. However, Nico quickly attributed his lack of knowledge to the fact that not everyone has a medical background like her. Preparations for Martha's arrival began immediately. Nico quickly prepared a bed for her on the sofa in the spare bedroom. Strangely, the young woman felt happy. Perhaps it reminded her of her own grandmother Helen. Whatever the reason, she was truly eager to meet Martha. Ryan brought his grandmother the next day, in the evening. When Nico saw the timid old woman entering the hallway, she immediately went to her and helped her sit on the poof, making it more comfortable for her to take off her boots. Martha smiled shyly and tried to insist that she could do it herself, but Nico didn't listen. With the skill and experience gained from caring for her own elderly relative, she quickly assisted the elderly woman in undressing and removing her shoes. Martha was unaccustomed to such care and constantly expressed her gratitude to Nico. The young woman felt a bit uncomfortable, as she didn't feel like she had done anything particularly significant or worthy of such praise. Meanwhile, Ryan didn't show much gallantry towards his own grandmother. He simply led her to the room, showed her the sofa, reminded her that dinner would be served when Nico called everyone to the kitchen, and then left the room. Seeing such greeting, Nico decided to take matters into her own hands. She entered her grandmother's room with a friendly smile and inquired about her comfort, whether there was a draught from the window, her preferred TV programs, and if she needed anything else in general. Once again, the elderly woman was taken aback by such kindness and acceptance. She thanked Nico sincerely, just as she had done a minute earlier, and politely asked her not to bother too much. As for Ryan, he was dissatisfied with the increased attention his girlfriend was giving to his grandmother. It even seemed to Nico that he was jealous and wanted to quickly whisk her away whenever she came into her room. A few days later, Nico came home from work and was stunned. She found Martha engaged in crafting, and the atmosphere in the apartment was different from the morning when Nico and Ryan had rushed off to work. The windows were covered with garlands, and there was a decorated Christmas tree in the living room. In short, the apartment finally had a festive atmosphere. While Nico quietly admired the decorations, Ryan arrived home too. However, he did not share his girlfriend's enthusiasm for what he saw, and advised his own grandmother to rest more instead of cluttering the space with unnecessary stuff. To avoid quarrelling with her beloved, Nico chose to retreat to the kitchen to prepare dinner. However, she was upset with his insensitivity and lack of appreciation for the other person's work. Nico started preparing dinner in the kitchen, while Ryan, tired from his work, lounged on the sofa in front of the TV. It was an ordinary evening, almost like a family gathering. The grandmother, who did not want to sit idly by, entered the kitchen and, despite Nico's objections, actively participated in the cooking. Throughout, Marta talked incessantly, sharing stories that alternately made Nico happy, sad, and sometimes even frightened. Nico learned from Martha that she was born and raised in the same small village where their family house still stood. She married and gave birth to her son Paul there. She worked as a math teacher at the local village school, and her husband worked on the farm. They always dreamed that their only son would have the best in life. That's why at the first opportunity, they bought Paul an apartment in the city so that he could study and live there. Paul studied averagely, finished a technical school, and started working. A few years later, Paul got married, and his father passed away. "I never really liked Lynette, but I never said a bad word about her," Martha said. "The apartment was registered to me because my husband was afraid that our naive son would squander it by marrying some swindler, while we were working so hard to earn money for it. Lynette threatened, demanded to change documents, and then just 6 months after my husband's death, Paul passed away too. After that, Lynette directed all her anger towards me, demanding that the apartment be transferred to her name immediately. Even though it was decided a long time ago that Ryan would inherit the apartment after my death, Lynette was angry with that. She constantly caused trouble and prevented me from entering the apartment. Do you think I don't understand? Why can't I spend the night in the apartment I bought with my own money for my son?" Martha said quietly as she kneaded the dough for the pie. "No, I understand everything clearly. Lynette is using my apartment for her own enjoyment. She sent Ryan to get me, while she will spend time with her boyfriend in the apartment. I apologize for bothering you with our family troubles." "You're not bothering me at all," Nico protested eagerly. "You can stay here as long as you want. Do you know how much you remind me of my grandmother Helen?" Martha smiled and went back to kneading the dough for the pie. She calmly and instructively told Nico that her years as a school teacher had not been in vain, and that she could see through people. She assured Nico that she had a pure and innocent soul, and hoped that fate would reward her for her kindness and sincerity. Nico smiled awkwardly, rubbing the edge of the tablecloth, and thought that her reward, Ryan, was watching TV in the next room. "Well, my dear, I understand everything," the elderly woman continued. "Wasn't I ever young, and didn't remember how much I wanted to be alone with my beloved? And here I am now, an old woman with my own problems and ailments. But I won't be here long to embarrass you. In a couple of days I'll go to my village. Winter is so nice there. The ice on the river is thick and strong, so you can skate on it. My village can't compare to your city. Oh, by the way, why don't you take Ryan and visit me in the village? Whenever you have a free moment, come and be my dear guests in my house. It's also nice there in the summer. The nearby forest is full of berries, and the orchard has fragrant apples and pears. And the air, oh, what air! Not like here. In short, you must come with Ryan as soon as you can." Impressed by stories, Nico even covered her eyes with pleasure. If it were up to her, she would go to the village right now, but unfortunately there was no such opportunity. "Okay, we will definitely visit you at your village. But now tell me, please, what's wrong with your health? What happened that caused you to be hospitalized?" The old woman looked at her with surprise, raising her bright, yet not faded eyes. "Honey, this is the first time I've met someone who's interested in hearing about other people's ailments." "Well, I'm a nurse." Nico tried to brush it off as a joke. "But still, what happened? I also work in a hospital, but a different one. Maybe it would have been better for you to come to us or contact our doctors. They will help to advise you." Martha briefly recounted to Nico the reasons for her health issues, without going into detail. "Well, we'll fight for you," Nico assured the elderly woman with a confident smile. "We'll treat you in our hospital next time. You will be okay. We'll even find you a groom, if you like." The two women burst into loud laughter. Ryan came out of the living room, drawn away from watching TV by their laughter. He asked when dinner would be, and was lovingly seated at the table. After dinner, Ryan announced that he had received a work-related message and needed to urgently attend to an incident. This occasionally happened in his position. Martha and Nico escorted the young man to the door and then sat down to watch an old movie on TV, the same one Ryan had been watching before. From the outside, the two women appeared to be like a grandmother and her granddaughter, reminiscing about the past and exchanging opinions about the present. Suddenly, Martha looked at Nico, who was engrossed in watching the plot unfold on the screen and cheering for her heroes, and asked her, "Nico, do you have any communication with Ryan's mother? Do you know each other?" "No," Nico shrugged her shoulders. "We saw each other once on the day at the hospital, and then only briefly." "I see." The elderly woman shook her head thoughtfully. "The only advice I can give you from my perspective and life experience is to keep your distance from her. Don't get too close, Nico. She is not a kind person and jealous. You should always be wary. Don't think I'm an old hag talking nonsense about her. I've lived a long life and not a happy one. I remember many things about her that she has long forgotten. You're a good girl, Nico. Good and conscientious. That's the kind of girl that girls like Lynette choose as their victim. Just remember that and be on your guard." The next day, the three of them celebrated New Year's Eve together. Ryan dressed in a shirt and tie for the occasion, Nico in a nice dress, and of course Grandma Martha. They hugged each other, exchanged wishes for happiness and joy, and called friends, colleagues and acquaintances, sending and receiving various cards through messengers. The three of them sat like that until midnight, and then Martha went to bed, saying she was tired from the whole day. Ryan and Nico were left alone. After watching a few more programs on TV, they prepared to rest. Ryan suggested going out onto the balcony, standing for a while, watching the fireworks and talking. Nico nodded silently, quickly put on her coat, and within a couple of minutes she was standing on the balcony of her apartment, next to her boyfriend. "Happy New Year! Happy New Year!" came the voices from the street, tempting them to join the lively crowd lighting fireworks, holding sparklers, and uncorking bottles of champagne. But Ryan remained silent, and Nico stayed silent beside him. Finally, the man began speaking cautiously, as if he were a swimmer, unsure if the river he had chosen had any hidden currents. "Nico, we've known each other for a long time, and I've been thinking about this for a while. I've decided that I've had enough of meeting occasionally. I realized that I need you in my life all the time. Will you marry me?" Nico was beyond happy. Her favourite man had just proposed to her, and on New Year's Eve, no less. The young woman nodded enthusiastically, showing Ryan that his proposal had found a great response in her heart. The young man smiled, hugged Nico, and pulled her close to him. They went back inside and continued discussing their future life together as a family. That night, Nico and Ryan couldn't sleep until the early hours of the morning. They shared their dreams and wishes, not holding back anything that came to their minds. They fantasized about a country house, having 2 children of different genders, regular family trips to the sea, and of course a bigger apartment. Ryan suggested selling her small 2-bedroom apartment and using the money to upgrade to a 3-bedroom apartment, as it would be more convenient with children. Nico agreed with him, as she had already thought about it herself. In short, this New Year's night was a success for Nico, as was the entire first day of the year. She didn't have to go to work, so she flew around the apartment, recounting every detail of their pleasant night conversation to Martha. The elderly woman listened to Nico with a smile, congratulated her from the bottom of her heart, and reminded her once again that she was eagerly awaiting her visit to her village. The elderly lady left for her village on January 2nd. As she got into the car of her village acquaintances, she waved goodbye, and Nico sighed as she watched the car drive away. She felt comfortable and free with Grandma Martha. The thought crossed her mind that she wouldn't mind living under the same roof with this nice elderly woman for a while longer. She hadn't grown tired of her company at all. A few days later, when Nico was preparing dinner, Ryan came back from work unexpectedly. "Hello, my honey," greeted the young man. "I have news for you. My mum wants to meet you, so don't make any plans for tonight. No objections, please." "Well, don't worry. There are no objections at all." Nico removed the apron she had been wearing in the kitchen to prevent staining her clothes. She turned off the oven where she had been roasting meat. From the start of their life together, she did not want to argue with Ryan. If Lynette wanted to see her, Nico felt it was best to go along with her desire. After all, she gave birth to and raised Nico's future husband, which meant a lot. The visit to Nico's future mother-in-law took place that evening. She met her son and Nico in a terry cloth robe with an empty table. It was clear that no one was going to make a fuss about the son's intention to marry. First, Lynette asked Nico about her parents, childhood, work, and career prospects. These were the usual questions, but Nico felt that each of her answers was being carefully evaluated against some ideal image. Nico tried to answer clearly and completely, hoping to satisfy Ryan and his mother. But Ryan seemed indifferent to all this situation. He wandered around the apartment absent-mindedly, clearly showing that he wanted a snack, and he hadn't had time to eat at Nico's home. Finally, he had to order a couple of large pizzas from the nearest eatery because there was nothing to eat in the apartment. After the meal, the communication, or rather the interview, continued, but not as intensely. An hour later, Ryan's mother learned everything she wanted to know about Nico, and without any remorse, she told them that they were free to go because her man was due back from work any minute. Nico and Ryan put on their coats in silence and left. This visit left a very heavy impression on the girl. But the next weekend was entirely different. Ryan fulfilled his promise and took Nico to the village to visit his grandmother. The elderly woman was overjoyed and treated them like dear guests. She set a sumptuous table, and it was a desired relief after the cold meeting at Lynette's. Ryan left his bride at his grandmother's house, citing important work matters. He promised to come back for Nico in the evening, but only managed to arrive the next day. If Martha hadn't been such a wonderful conversationalist, it would have been hard for Nico to spend time with her. However, the two women found a common language, and time flew by unnoticed. From that moment on, whenever Nico had spare time, she immediately informed her fiancé and went with him to the village to visit Martha. She enjoyed those trips even in Ryan's absence. Their weekends and work shifts didn't always align, but sometimes Ryan accompanied her. When Martha needed to go to the city for an examination next time, the question of where she would stay didn't even arise. Nico said right away that she would be happy to shelter her groom's grandmother, and she didn't agree with other options. Time passed, and the wedding date approached. Ryan and Nico decided to have the wedding in the summer, when the weather would be warm and pleasant. While it was still rainy March outside, they began preparing for this momentous event. Nico continued to spend all weekends in the village. She had become attached to that quiet place and considered it her second home. Additionally, the elderly woman's health had worsened slightly, so Nico constantly brought her new medicines and devices to monitor her health. Then came April, as rainy as March. Grandma Martha's condition worsened, and it was decided to hospitalize her, this time in the hospital where Nico worked. After the first check, it became apparent that the elderly woman's health had significantly worsened since her last examination. When Nico was going through her medical records, she caught herself thinking that she had reacted calmly to these diagnoses when she read them in other people's medical records, but now she couldn't hold back her tears. Is Grandma Martha going to leave them any time soon? No, it's absolutely impossible. She has to wait for Ryan's wedding, meet her great-grandchildren in her village, and delight them with delicious food and funny jokes. Nico was also struck by her future mother-in-law's treatment of Martha's health. Lynette seemed to have no sympathy or intention to visit the sick woman. She simply dryly asked her son, "Will you leave this world soon?" Ryan then tried to justify his mum, saying that she was joking, but Nico didn't find it funny at all. Every morning, Nico came to work with a sense of dread, and the first thing she did was check for updates on Martha's health. Unfortunately, the news was never good. The elderly woman felt worse and heavier with each passing day. One early morning, when Nico arrived at work half an hour early, as usual, to see Martha before her shift began, the elderly woman asked her to sit down in a chair in her room. Nico did as the grandmother asked, but she didn't like the request itself. "Don't worry," the elderly woman said clearly, as if she were arguing with a stubborn schoolboy. "Don't worry about me, please. I'm not blind, and I see who truly cares for me. My grandson is a true son of his mother, and he doesn't show any concern for his grandmother. Lynette is ridiculous to talk about. She's only coming to the funeral to make sure I'm done. A notary is coming here today at 10 a.m. A friend of mine arranged it, as I requested. I've decided to give you the deed to my apartment and house. My property shouldn't go to Lynette or Ryan, who isn't a bad guy, but he is too influenced by his mother. He'll squander it all if given the chance. No, I'd rather leave it to you." Martha sighed heavily and looked directly into Nico's eyes, covering her hand with her dry palm. "And the last, I shouldn't say this, but take a good look at Ryan before you tell him yes. It's a woman's intuition. He's my grandson, but alas, I see that his mother's influence is stronger than his father's. You deserve to be happy. Be happy, my dear. Everything will be okay." Nico tried to object, but Martha silenced her with a single gesture. She had made up her mind, and it was her final decision, unwavering. The notary arrived at exactly 10 o'clock and formalized everything as required. Nico became the owner of all Grandma Martha's property, and by evening the elderly lady was gone. At the funeral, Nico saw Lynette's lovely light smile and Ryan's calm demeanour. They didn't know about the will yet, but later, when they found out that, there was a huge scandal. Lynette, forgetting all decorum, shouted and threatened to sue her future daughter-in-law if she didn't return the apartment that she had been waiting for so many years. Ryan reacted more calmly, although Nico could tell from his face that he was uncomfortable. The girl reassured her groom that they would soon be married and that they would share all the property. He shrugged uncertainly and left, explaining that he had to go to work. Nico didn't specify what kind of work could be done on the day of her grandmother's funeral. She was too devastated to notice that. Time went on. One day Nico asked Ryan to take her to the village, where she was going to sort through the grandmother's belongings. The groom took their arrival at the village as a pretext to discuss the fact that both the apartment and the house had been given to Nico mistakenly, and the property should be returned to the rightful owners, him and his mother. And to Nico's great shock, in his desire to get what he wanted, he almost turned to insults. Nico felt tears welling up. Feeling suffocated, the young woman rushed out into the yard and walked for a long time until her heart stopped racing. Only then she turned back. Nico was about to enter the house when she overheard her fiancé talking on the phone. The content of the conversation shocked her. "Don't worry, my dear, it won't take long. I'll make her return everything. Yes, of course, before the wedding. She'll do it. But it's a bit more complicated with her apartment. We'll sell it after the wedding and get a bigger one. So it would be considered joint property. Plus, this little house and my grandmother's apartment. We'll get it all. We'll live happily ever after, don't worry. Take care of yourself, my little bunny. Enough talk. She'll be here any minute. I'll tell her I'm going to work, and then I'll come to your place. Wait for me." Nico felt as if she had been punched in the chest and the head at the same time. How could Ryan do this? Who gave him the right to deceive and manipulate like this? Something must be done, right now, immediately, otherwise I will go crazy thinking about why Ryan has done this to me. Taking a deep breath, Nico straightened her back and said to Ryan mentally, "Well, no, my sweetheart, you've picked on the wrong one." Nico entered the house and went straight to the bedroom. Ryan was sitting there alone, twirling his phone in his hands. Now, she knew his secret, and his tricks wouldn't work on her any more. After his revelations on the phone, she could see right through this deceitful and self-serving man who thought he could toy with other people's emotions. "Honey, I've been urgently summoned to work again." Ryan began to lie inspiringly. "So I'll leave now and come back tomorrow to take you home. You take your time here. Do everything here properly." "Oh, come on," Nico replied calmly, not giving him a second thought. "There's no need to come back. I'll come back on my own, and you on your own. And give me back the keys to my apartment, please, right now. You're not going back in there, and you're not going back in this house, neither you nor your girlfriend. And you won't get the apartment, neither yours nor mine. And if you disagree, the police can explain your rights. By the way, they and my colleagues are on their way here right now, in case you would like to argue with me." Of course, about the police and colleagues, Nico lied inspiringly, just as Ryan had told her a minute earlier about work. But he couldn't know that, so confidently the girl spoke. Ryan stared silently at Nico's resolute face for a while. Then, with a sharp movement, he threw the keys on the table, covered with an embroidered tablecloth, and headed for the exit. "You're going to be sorry you ever messed with me." He said goodbye, and a minute later, Nico heard the engine start in the car. The girl's first impulse was to sit down and burst into tears right there. But no, she couldn't. She had to act, and fast. Nico quickly ran to the neighbours, with whom she was well acquainted during her past visits, and in 2 hours, new locks were already installed everywhere, on the gate, in the house, and on the outbuildings. No chance for Ryan to slip through. Having finished with the house in the village, and having informed the neighbours and the district policeman about everything, Nico rushed to the city. She had no doubt that Ryan would sooner or later recover from the shock and start acting. Soon the new locks were installed on the door of her apartment. Now came the hardest part, the eviction of Lynette from Martha's apartment. And here Nico, of course, needed a lawyer. She found him through acquaintances. Carlos had not yet had time to establish a practice and win high-profile cases. He was simple and modest, but ready for feats and accomplishments in his professional field. And he was not presented to the girl in vain as a promising and thoughtful lawyer. Thanks to his efforts, Lynette was evicted from the apartment in a few months, although she desperately resisted. One day, Nico invited Carlos to celebrate their victory. The young man did not refuse. Soon the relationship between Nico and Carlos moved into the category of friendship, and then it turned into love, somehow on its own. After a year and a half of meetings, Carlos proposed to Nico to get married and move in with him. He said that the fate of her 2 apartments could be decided by the girl herself, as she pleased. But in Grandmother Martha's house, they could periodically rest with the whole family. Nico warmly supported the proposal of her beloved, and that's precisely what they did. Now in Martha's house hangs her portrait, which Nico managed to order in the atelier from the old photo. Nico and Carlos's children know very well who it is, and before going to bed, they often send air kisses to the portrait. This is how they were taught by their mother, who likes to repeat that Grandma Martha has become her close soul and a benefactor in this world. And the young woman hopes with all her strength that she and her husband will be able to raise their sons as honest, kind, open, and non-envious people, so that they would never even think of doing such a low and mean thing as Ryan had planned to do to her. Zoe placed the folder with the reports on the desk, put on her coat, and left the office. Today had been a tough day for her. All she wanted was to go home, make herself a hot tea with lemon, and wrap herself in a soft blanket. As she ran home, the drizzling rain and cold wind made her feel freezing. Upon seeing that all the lights were on in her apartment windows, Zoe immediately shivered and stopped. She realized that her husband was drunk. As she approached the apartment building, her suspicions were confirmed. From open windows, she heard loud music and her husband swearing with himself. The young woman knew that if she went inside now, she would have to listen to him all night. Tony would make a scene as usual, accusing her of all sorts of things. With a heavy sigh, Zoe sat down on a cold, wet bench. She didn't want to cry, but tears rolled down her cheeks like hail. Suddenly, she heard Tony's angry voice. "There you are! Who are we waiting for?" The man leaned out of the window, risking a fall, and kept mumbling more unintelligible curses directed at Zoe. "I'm coming," the woman said in a low voice. "I've just sat down to rest." However, that night the woman never got to rest. Tony yelled at her like a madman until morning, and only at dawn did he fall asleep, snoring at the kitchen table. Glancing at the clock, Zoe realized that there was no time left for sleep. After taking a shower, she had some tea and began cleaning the apartment. With a droopy look and red eyes from crying and lack of sleep, she went to work. As she was getting on the bus, she stumbled and fell into a huge puddle. The entire contents of her purse fell out into the muddy, wet sludge. Looking at her white coat, now stained with black drops, the woman cried in despair. An indifferent crowd of sleepy people rushed onto the bus, ignoring her. Well, don't cry," a man's voice nearby said. "Let me help?" "No need," Zoe sobbed. "Hurry and catch the bus, you'll be late." "I'm not in a hurry anywhere, and I can't leave such a wonderful woman in trouble." The man smiled. "My name's Ben, and you?" "Zoe." The man skillfully lifted Zoe out of the puddle, shook off her coat as best he could, and started picking up the items that had fallen out of her purse. "What should we do next?" Ben asked Zoe with a serious expression. "I don't know," the woman admitted honestly. She realized that she couldn't go to work in her current state, but she also didn't want to go home. Tony was most likely already awake and had started to hangover. His addiction to alcohol was a serious problem, and it seemed incurable. For 3 years, Zoe had been trying to help him overcome his alcoholism, but every day her hope diminished. "Come with me. I'm staying at that hotel across the street. You can stay in the room, get warm, and I'll quickly go to the store and buy you some clean clothes." "No, really, it's not necessary," Zoe objected. "No refusals accepted. If I fell into a puddle, would you leave me in trouble?" "No." "That's right." Zoe couldn't understand what came over her at that moment. Perhaps this kind and cheerful man had caught her attention with his friendly demeanour, Or maybe she simply wanted someone to take care of her. "Let's go," the woman said quietly. While Ben went shopping, Zoe took a shower, warmed up and sat down in a comfortable armchair in front of the TV after having a cup of coffee. She didn't fully comprehend what she was doing, since she had work waiting for her, including an urgent report that her strict boss demanded. But she felt cosy in this quiet place, free from the daily hustle and bustle. "I'm back," Ben shouted, trying to squeeze through the narrow doorway with a heavy bag. "Here's a coat, and in this package are pants and warm socks. Try them on. I think I got the sizes right." "Thank you," the woman said, feeling embarrassed. "You didn't have to buy such an expensive coat. A windbreaker would have been enough. But thank you anyway. I'll definitely repay you. And by the way, I ordered a table for our lunch at the restaurant. I just realized that I haven't even had breakfast today. Will you keep me company? I can't eat it all by myself." "Okay," Zoe smiled. In the end, the woman spent the entire day with Ben. He shared stories of his interesting and adventurous life, filled with vibrant emotions and travels to different countries. Ben had a wealth of experiences to talk about. On the other hand, she could only discuss her own dull life, but she chose not to, not wanting to spoil the magic of the day. As evening approached, Zoe realized it was time for her to leave, but she couldn't bring herself to go. "I have to go," the woman said sadly with a smile. "Zoe, I wanted to tell you—" The man took Zoe's hand. When she felt his warmth, she forgot everything. The next morning, Zoe and Ben woke up early. The man opened the curtains, letting the sunshine in. "I'm leaving tonight," he said sadly, turning to Zoe lying in his bed. The woman wrinkled her nose at the bright sunlight and let out a sweet yawn. At that moment, she didn't want to think about him leaving tonight, or the fact that this fairy tale would end forever. She was happy in the present moment, and wished time would stand still, leaving just the two of them in the world. "Zoe, I don't know much about your life. You don't tell me, and I don't want to pry. Tell me, are you capable of making impulsive decisions that could change your destiny?" "I don't know." "Will you come with me? You'll never regret it. I don't know what happened to me, but I do know one thing. I don't want to be apart from you, even for a second. I guess that's what love at first sight feels like. Now, I have to attend to some business for a few hours. Will you stay? We can leave together in the evening." "But I need to gather my documents and belongings at least," the woman said, feeling confused. "Okay, tell me the address and I'll pick you up." "No need. I'll come myself," Zoe said softly. "Okay, I'll be waiting." Ben hugged the woman tightly, not wanting to let her go for a second. He didn't know what had enchanted him, but he realized he wanted her by his side always. Zoe walked home, feeling happy for the first time in years. The attention and compliments from men had long been forgotten by the young woman. Tony, her husband, rarely paid her any attention and never complimented her. He was not a bad man when he was sober. After every drinking binge, he would fall into a state of depression and beg for forgiveness from his wife. Things would seem to improve for a while, but before long, another drinking episode would occur, and the cycle would continue. Perhaps Zoe would have left him earlier, but she felt pity for her husband, especially since he had recently lost his parents. She knew that if he were left alone, he would fall through. But now she had an epiphany and realized that the best years of her life were passing by. With courage and determination, she decided to do something different from her. She would gather her documents and necessary belongings and leave with Ben. And whatever happens, perhaps somewhere out there she could find happiness. "Where have you been?" Tony asked in a despondent voice. Sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. Zoe guessed that most likely he had run out of money because he was completely sober. Ignoring her husband's question, Zoe quickly started packing her things into a travel bag. "Do you have any money?" Tony asked hopefully. "No, I paid the rent 2 days ago," the woman replied mechanically. "Where are you going?" Her husband jumped up alarmed. "I'm going on a business trip," Zoe lied, avoiding eye contact. She couldn't admit that she was leaving him and running away to an unknown destination with a strange man. Tony let out a heavy sigh and laid down on the couch. He tried to sleep, but his pounding headache prevented him from finding any rest. The words of his wife did not immediately reach him, and only after a few minutes did he realize that Zoe had never gone on a business trip. Her position had nothing to do with them. "Zoe, where are you going?" Tony rushed out into the hallway. "I've already told you," she replied. "Don't lie. Are you leaving me?" he asked fearfully. "Please don't go away." "Tony, I'm fed up. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry, but we're not happy together. Maybe after I leave, you'll find a woman who can help you become a better man and husband." Zoe lowered her head and sat down on the ottoman. She had hoped to avoid this unpleasant conversation, but she still had to explain herself. Perhaps it was for the best. She would set the record straight. Tears welled up in Tony's eyes as he looked at the woman he loved. He couldn't believe this was happening in reality, not in a dream. He couldn't let Zoe leave because he knew he would be lost without her. "My darling, my love, please don't do anything foolish. I know I've hurt you. I swear I'll never touch alcohol again in my life. We have our whole lives ahead of us. We can be happy. I'm sorry. I couldn't accept the death of my parents, and after that incident, I lost control. It won't happen again. Please don't leave me. I'll die without you." Tony knelt down, hugged his wife's knees, and began kissing her feet. Zoe silently swallowed her tears. She realized that her worst fear had come true. She couldn't leave him in this situation because it would be like passing a death sentence on him. "Get up," she quietly said after a minute. "I'm not leaving." She sat in the kitchen by the window, silently weeping. The thought of Ben waiting for her while she was in her despised apartment made her feel sick. But she couldn't do anything else. She couldn't abandon the man who needed her help and support so desperately. "You rest," Tony whispered. "I'll clean the apartment and then cook us dinner. Tomorrow I'll go to work. I'll work day and night. You won't need anything. I promise you won't regret believing in me. Do you believe?" "I do," Zoe whispered bitterly. Meanwhile, Ben had been standing near the window for 2 hours, looking out for Zoe. His train had left half an hour ago, but he couldn't leave without her. He still had a faint hope that she would come after all. He waited until morning. As soon as dawn broke, he realized that Zoe would never appear in his life again. He let out a heavy sigh, took his suitcase, and headed to the train station. After meeting this extraordinary woman, he was left with a bitter aftertaste. Only now did he truly understand what it meant to be abandoned. He was usually the one who dumped women, not the other way around. Zoe had been trying to forget Ben for a month. At first, she thought it was just a typical romantic affair, but over time she realized that his memory refused to leave her heart. Every day she regretted more and more how foolishly she had let go of such a wonderful man. Tony kept his promise. He didn't drink for almost a month, although he didn't bring any money home and spent more and more time on the couch complaining of poor health. Once she came home from work, Zoe saw that all the windows in the apartment were brightly lit again. It could only mean one thing. Tony had started drinking again. Zoe realized that she didn't want to step foot inside her own home. Instead, she decided to go to her friend's place. Quietly entering the apartment for her things, she saw Tony sitting in the kitchen, hugging a bottle and cursing to himself. Stealthily, she slipped into the bedroom, grabbed what she needed at this time, and rushed out of the apartment. "Hi," Tricia said, understanding everything without words. "Tricia, I won't go back to him anymore. I can't stand it anymore. Let me stay at your place for a while, Zoe said sadly. I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Tricia winked. Take off your jacket and come into the kitchen. I'll feed you and tell you about my grand plans. Zoe and Tricia had been friends for a long time, ever since Zoe was in the orphanage. Zoe couldn't stand up for herself and would often cry in a corner due to constant bullying from the other children. And Tricia, being a couple of years older, immediately took the young girl under her wing. She had always been brave, determined and full of enthusiasm, and even after many years, she hadn't changed a bit. Well, here's the deal. I decided to start my own business. I have big plans, but I can't do it without your help. You're an excellent accountant, so I'm really counting on you to help me with my finances. What kind of business are you talking about? Zoe asked with a smile. Don't laugh. I believe we can make it work. I want to open a beauty salon to start with. I have experience in this field after all. I've been working as a hairdresser for 5 years, and if it doesn't work out, you'll lose all your money. Are you okay with that possibility? I am certain that it will work out, with your help. You have a sharp mind, Tricia insisted. Okay, then I'll help you with accounting, Zoe agreed. No, that won't do. I don't want your help. I want you to be a part of it. You'll have to quit your job and join our business. Are you out of your mind? Zoe objected. How am I supposed to support myself? Don't worry about that. I have enough money for the first time. You'll live with me. Think about it. What's in store for you at your job? A meagre salary and a full-time job? But here you'll have new prospects. I've already counted everything. Let's not get too excited. I'll think it over first, then I'll give you an answer. Good, Tricia said, pleased. I knew you wouldn't refuse me. In the morning, Zoe felt sick. A headache and nausea suddenly overcame her. Realizing she couldn't work in such a state, she lay back in bed. Maybe I poisoned myself with something yesterday, suggested the woman. I've never felt this bad before. What if you're pregnant? Tricia suggested. No, Tony and I haven't been close for a long time, the woman said, then stammered, remembering Ben. What? Why the strange gaze? Tricia was losing patience with curiosity. Are you pregnant, after all? I don't know, Zoe admitted. It's quite possible. I should go to a doctor. Zoe never had any secrets from her best friend, so she told her about Ben, how she fell in love with him at first sight, and how she wanted to leave with him, but couldn't find the courage to leave Tony. What a fool you are. I have no more words, Tricia said angrily. You had a chance, most likely the only one in your life. Do you know how to find him? No, Zoe said sadly. I don't even know what city he lives in. We spent the whole day chatting with him. Ben told me a lot of interesting things about his life, but as it turned out, I know absolutely nothing about him, only his name. Okay, well, we won't get upset ahead of time. If your pregnancy is confirmed, you're going to have the baby. Don't make the mistake I made years ago. I'll help you with everything, but promise me you'll choose me as the godmother for your baby. I promise. Zoe smiled as she hugged her friend. She felt very comfortable around Tricia. She was more like an older sister than a friend to her. Zoe knew for sure that without Tricia's support, she would have a very hard time in life. The next day, Zoe went to the doctor. Her hunch was confirmed. Congratulations, you're 5 weeks pregnant, the doctor said with a gentle smile. Thank you. Zoe was embarrassed for some reason. Do you know who it's going to be? Not yet, laughed the doctor, but we will see in due time. Zoe left the clinic and realized that an important stage of change had come in her life. She had to let go of fear and start to change something in her gloomy everyday life. Tricia was right. They should take a risk, make every effort to create a business, and change their standard of living. Well, what did the doctor say? Tricia asked as soon as Zoe entered the apartment. I have 2 pieces of news. And both are good. The woman smiled. Great! Tell me already, don't keep me in suspense. I'm pregnant. That's the first news. And the second is that I've calculated everything. I think the money you have saved will be enough to start a business. Hooray! Shouted Tricia, throwing herself around her friend's neck. And are you going to quit your job? Yes. I'll write a letter of resignation tomorrow, promised Zoe. 6 months later, 2 friends were sitting in a small, cosy office. They had succeeded, thanks to Tricia's determination and Zoe's professionalism. Of course, the profit was still meagre, but it was there. And this already gave hope that in the future it would be possible to open a small chain of salons around the city. I don't even know what I'll be doing without you, Tricia lamented. But it's not like I'm going on maternity leave forever, Zoe laughed. I'll definitely be with the baby for a couple of months, and then I'm going to hire a nanny for a few hours a day. You're right, I was thinking the same thing. I forgot to tell you that I met Tony at the house last night. He was waiting for you and I chased him away, Tricia confessed. You did the right thing, Zoe said with a frown. I think the alcohol is making him crazy. After the last time we talked, I don't even want to hear about him. Is that when he suggested you keep the baby in the maternity hospital? Tricia grinned. How did he even think of such a thing? Yeah, he said, I'll forgive your affair if you give up the baby and forget all about him. You know, he needs a strong woman who can take him by the skin and shake him a couple of times. Maybe then he'd get his brain back in order. He's not a bad man, but he's killing himself, said Tricia. Perhaps you're right, agreed Zoe. Feeling a little sick, Zoe hurried to finish her business and went home early. She had been staying with Tricia until now. Her friend said she could live with her as long as she wanted, even for the rest of her life. Seeing Tony at the entrance, Zoe wanted to turn around and go back, but it was too late. Her ex-husband had already noticed her. Why have you come again? She asked in an angry voice. Zoe, don't chase me away. Listen to me, Tony said softly. If you want to say your idiotic suggestion again, you shouldn't. No, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I agree. Come back home, please. What do you agree? Did I give you any conditions? The woman wondered. I agree to have your child live with our family, the man said, looking hopefully at Zoe. I am not well alone. Have you forgotten what you promised my sick mother? You said you would never leave me. I remember. But you also promised her you'd quit drinking and bring money into the family. I'll quit drinking, I promise, assured Tony. Moreover, I'll never reproach you with another man's child. Tony, stop it. Don't talk nonsense. We've parted once and for all. Leave me alone at last. All right, said the man quietly. Then lend me 100 until payday. I have no money even for bread. Take it, Zoe said, holding out some bills to him. Please, forget the way here. Turning around, she walked quickly into the entranceway. After such encounters, she became unbearably bitter. On the one hand, she felt sorry for Tony, but on the other hand, she realized that this could not go on for long. She could not sacrifice herself and babysit him all her life. Remembering Ben, the woman cried once more. She still couldn't forgive herself for that irreparable mistake. She could have at least said goodbye to him and taken his phone number. Maybe with him she could have found happiness. 3 months later, she sadly stared out of the window, watching the wind pick up large snowflakes, preventing them from reaching the ground. When she saw a man carrying luxurious roses approaching the maternity hospital, she frowned, trying to hold back her tears. No one was coming to her. Happy fathers were bringing bouquets to their wives and writing romantic notes. And one of them had even organized a small celebration under the windows yesterday. He was overjoyed about the birth of his daughter, but no one was happy for her little girl, except for Zoe and Tricia. 2 days ago, Zoe gave birth to a baby girl. It was already evident that Leslie was a spitting image of her father. Holly, your husband is here, Zoe smiled. And he's with the bouquet again. I'll give him a hard time, Holly, a neighbour in the ward, exclaimed. He's already spent so much money on flowers. It's his way of expressing his joy, Zoe explained. You're right. Emil has wanted a daughter for years. We have 3 sons. He said if I gave birth to a girl, he would carry us in his arms for the rest of his life, Holly boasted. He called all our family. He is going to celebrate the birth of our daughter. I don't know how you'll manage alone with your baby. You're so unlucky. You're mistaken, Zoe said angrily. 2 days ago, I became the happiest woman ever. I finally have a purpose in life, and, believe me, not having a man around me doesn't diminish my happiness. Sometimes it's better without men. Not everyone is as caring as your Emil. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Holly hurried to apologise. But Zoe didn't take offence. She had long ago accepted her role as a single mother. It was her choice, and she didn't regret it at all. However, frankly speaking, I don't understand why you divorced your husband while being pregnant, Holly added, perplexed. Holly, let's change the subject. I'm doing very well in my life. I just didn't want to live with my husband. That's it. But is the child even from your ex-husband? Holly insisted. Yes, answered Zoe confidently, who was already tired of the general discussion of her life. So she put on her robe and went for a walk around the ward. The woman wanted to be discharged as soon as possible, to avoid hearing around the clock about how wonderful Holly's husband was and how unfortunate Zoe was. And finally that day came. Zoe was upset when she found out that she and Holly were being discharged on the same day. Emil, Holly's husband, was planning a grand show with a lot of relatives. The thought of leaving the hospital with only Tricia and the baby made Zoe feel sad. But there was nothing she could do. Zoe, at last! Shouted a happy Tricia, rushing to her friend. Where's our little Leslie? Now the nurse will bring her out and hand her to you. Tradition, so to speak, smiled Zoe. Listen, who else is being discharged today? Some important person, I suppose. There's a crowd at the entrance with balloons and flowers as well as a photographer. The only thing missing is an orchestra, marvelled Tricia. It's my roommate, being met by her relatives, explained Zoe. She's not a big shot. She's just her husband's favourite wife. Some people are lucky, said Tricia with a slight envy. When Tricia saw the nurse coming out with the baby, she rushed to her and gently took Leslie in her arms. Here is our happiness, whispered Tricia, cradling the baby in her arms. Tricia went quickly to the exit. Zoe, with a heavy bag, could barely keep up with her. Let me help you, smiled a guy standing at the entrance with a bouquet and balloons. He was probably one of Holly's relatives. No need, there's our car. Zoe waved him away and then looked up at the man. Suddenly she froze, unable to move. Ben was standing in front of her. You? She asked quietly. Ben was confused by the unexpected meeting, but quickly pulled himself together. Do you need help? If not, I'll go. My sister will be out soon. No, I don't need help. Zoe lowered her head and slowly walked down the steps. She was so confused that she was at a loss for words and couldn't soberly assess the situation. She wanted to throw herself into his arms, to tell him that he had recently become a father, but Ben's gaze was distant and cold. He looked at her with contempt. Sorry, I forgot to congratulate you, Ben shouted after her. She said nothing. Feeling uneasy, she quickly walked to the car, where her friend and her daughter were waiting for her. Zoe felt like she was doing something wrong again, making another mistake, but she didn't know how to act differently in this situation. What's wrong with you? Tricia asked, looking in the mirror at Zoe. Let's go, I'm fine, answered Zoe. She tried to appear calm, but the unexpected encounter with Ben was unsettling. His contemptuous gaze was still in her mind. Only low traitors are looked at that way. Holding Leslie close to her, Zoe tried to put Ben out of her mind, realizing that they would never be together again. After her actions, he would not believe that Leslie was his daughter, and she didn't want to run after him and prove his paternity because, in reality, they were practically strangers. "Are you upset with your roommate?" suggested Tricia at home. "No, that's not the reason. I saw him," Zoe said melancholically. "Who?" Tricia's eyes widened, not realizing what was going on with her friend. "I saw Ben, Leslie's father," Zoe admitted. "He was one of Holly's many guests, standing at the entrance of the maternity hospital with flowers." "So what? Why didn't you tell him about Leslie?" Tricia was indignant. "He looked at me coldly, and then he congratulated me on the birth of the baby with such disdain. You should have seen the look on his face at that moment." "What have you done? Why didn't you tell him everything?" "How do you imagine it? Get down on the ground. It's only in Brazilian soap operas that it's like that. Unfortunately, we are in the harsh reality of our lives, not in a romantic melodrama. He doesn't know me. He only knows that I'm a frivolous woman and a cheater. All I have to do is forget about him. Miracles don't happen." "You say he's a buddy of your roommate at the maternity hospital?" Tricia clarified, ignoring her friend's words. "Yes, he said he was waiting for his sister." "Do you have contacts of Holly?" Tricia inquired. "I gave her our business card. She's supposed to come to our salon. She wants to change her image and I don't have her number." "Wait, why do you need it?" "No reason, I was just asking. Forget it. You're at a new stage in your life now. You shouldn't be bitter about men. You should be excited about having a baby and dealing with it." "You're right," Zoe smiled. "She's so defenseless, and I want to carry her in my arms all the time, to warm her with my warmth." "You shouldn't do that," Tricia laughed. "Do not accustom the baby to your hands." Soon, the worries about her daughter, lack of sleep, and fatigue pushed the thoughts of Ben out of Zoe's head. It was not easy for the woman because she had to deal with work as well. Tricia didn't know much about accounting. "Hello, we're on Zoe's recommendation. She owns this salon." The pleasant blonde smiled. Tricia almost choked on her coffee. She realized that the woman she had been waiting for almost 2 months had come. "Come in, please," Tricia invited. "You must be Holly, Zoe's roommate." "Yes, Zoe left me her business card. She was very complimentary about your salon. I thought I'd drag my husband here too. Emil just needs a haircut, and I need the whole range of services." "Great," says Tricia. "Let me take you to another room. The girls will take care of you, and I'll give your husband a haircut." "Thank you," said the woman, with an arrogant look at Tricia. Tricia realized that she was unlikely to have a conversation with this lady. There was only one hope, that Holly's husband did not suffer from delusions of grandeur, unlike his wife. "Maybe a cup of coffee or tea? Your wife won't be free soon," Tricia asked Emil. "I wouldn't say no to coffee," the man smiled. "It's been raining since morning and I'm very reactive to this kind of weather. I wanted to lie at home in peace. It's my day off, but my wife had a firm intention to go to the beauty parlour." Tricia placed a cup of flavoured drinks and candy on the coffee table. She was very nervous about starting this conversation, but realized it needed to be done now or never. "Emil, my best friend was in the maternity ward with your wife. They were discharged on the same day. I saw how excitedly you welcomed your daughter and spouse." The woman smiled. "That's right. I was so happy about the birth of my daughter that I was willing to move mountains," Emil confessed. "The thing is, there was a man among your guests. Ben, if I'm not mistaken. He's a relative of your wife's?" "Yes, he is. Ben is Holly's sister. He's rarely home, but I managed to reach him on the phone. He works as a captain on a cruise ship." "Why do you ask?" Emil regained his composure. "The fact is that my friend and your relative are old friends. They saw each other that day outside the maternity hospital. Ben gave her his phone number, but she, being forgetful, lost it. My friend was very upset about it," Tricia lied, hoping her plan would work. "Well, no problem," Emil said, taking out his cell phone. "Write down his number and give it to your friend." "Thank you so much. She will be thrilled," the woman exclaimed, almost jumping up and down. Tricia knew that she hadn't acted good. The woman had one principle in life: she never lied to anyone. But for the sake of the best friend's happiness, it was acceptable to deviate from her rules. After all, who else but her would help Zoe? Dialing Ben's phone number, Tricia clenched her fists, silently praying for her plan to work. She knew that the man probably wouldn't even listen to her and would simply hang up. "Hello, I need to speak with Ben," Tricia said uncertainly when the man picked up the phone. "It's me. What can I do for you?" "I'm Zoe's friend. Do you remember her? Recently you saw her at the entrance to the maternity ward." "And?" The man interrupted her irritably. "I'm probably going to seem crazy to you right now, but I think you have the right to know the truth. The fact is, you're the father of Zoe's daughter." "Are you out of your mind?" Ben asked in bewilderment. "I've only seen your friend once, not counting that meeting at the maternity hospital. What are you even counting on? Do you want to make money off me? It's not going to work. I'm not as simple-minded as you and your darling friend think I am." "Well, I've put you on notice. Goodbye," Tricia said angrily, hanging up the phone. The woman was upset. She of course realized that Ben was unlikely to start jumping with delight at what he had heard, but she didn't think that he would take it like this. But after all, she didn't know what he was like. "Well, okay, at least I tried." The woman cheered herself up. Early in the morning, Tricia was awakened by a phone call. She did not realize that Ben was calling. "Hello, I'll be passing through your city tomorrow. Where can I find Zoe?" the man asked sullenly. "You can stop by our salon and we'll talk there. After yesterday's conversation, I'm not sure that you should meet my friend," Tricia replied rudely. "Did you decide to mess with my head? Why did you call me if you don't want me to see her?" "We'll talk when we meet." Tricia dictated the address and hurriedly hung up when she saw Zoe at the door. "Who's calling you so early?" wondered the sleepy woman. "It's not even 6 in the morning." "A client. She needs her hair done urgently," Tricia lied. She was already beginning to doubt the correctness of her decision because she hadn't expected Ben to be so skeptical about the news of the baby. She didn't want Zoe to get hurt in this situation because she was already having a hard time. Ben arrived the next day. Tricia didn't show much ceremony with him, speaking dryly and without any emotion. "As you can see, my friend and I are doing well, and we don't need anyone's handouts. Zoe loves you. She didn't come to you that day, but she had a serious reason for not coming. During the pregnancy, she was able to pull herself together and set herself up to never see you again. But that recent encounter brought back memories of you. I can see her sneaking tears sometimes. I realize you have doubts about your daughter. I can assure you 100% that Leslie is your daughter. I can see now that you and she are very much alike. I apologize if I offended you yesterday. I don't hear such news every day. At first I wanted to ignore your words, but they kept me awake at night and focused during the day. So I decided to find out the truth. Can I see Zoe? Perhaps we need to explain ourselves," Ben said calmly. "Yes, that's why I tracked you down." Zoe put Leslie down and went to the window. She had been dreaming about Ben again tonight. She didn't know how long it would last, or when she could get him out of her heart and head. A quiet knock on the door brought her out of her sad thoughts. Covering the door to the room where the baby slept, she hurried to open the front door. When she saw Ben on the threshold, she turned pale and rubbed her eyes. For a moment she thought she was going crazy with love. "Hi," the man smiled. "Shh, the baby just fell asleep." "May I come in?" he asked in a whisper. Zoe stepped back from the door, letting the man into the apartment. Surprised and confused, she fell into a daze. Recently she had been thinking about him, realizing that it was unlikely she would ever see him again. And now he stood before her, so close yet so distant. "How did you find me?" Zoe asked, completely bewildered. "Never mind. Would you kindly explain what's going on? I was told you had a daughter. My daughter. Is this true? True. I have no claim on you, and having a child doesn't obligate you to anything. I had a daughter for myself. It was my decision. At that moment, a child's crying could be heard from the room. Leaving the man in the kitchen, Zoe hurried to the child. He quietly followed her in. Your friend spoke the truth. Ben smiled, examining his daughter carefully. The girl unconsciously smiled at the man, as if happy to see her daddy. She's smiling at me, Ben marvelled. Does she really understand or feel something at that age? Of course she does, laughed the woman. They already understand and feel everything in the womb. Do you want to hold her? Yes. Ben took his daughter in his arms, feeling a sense of ownership. When he noticed a small birthmark on Leslie's neck, he involuntarily smiled. I have the same, he said, only a little bigger. I know, Zoe said, lowering her eyes. I've tried to forget that meeting we had as best I could, but Leslie reminds me of you 24 hours a day. Zoe, tell me, why did you change your mind about coming with me? After all, I waited for you until morning, hoping you would come. Zoe realized it was time for her to explain herself to Ben. She loved this man and didn't want to hide anything from him. She wanted to tell him the truth. She recounted everything as it had happened. She told him about her ex-spouse, his alcohol addiction, and how she couldn't bring herself to leave him that night. At that moment, I didn't even think about the fact that I didn't have your phone number, and when I tried to find you, I realized I knew nothing about you except your name. A month later, I found out I was pregnant and immediately decided to leave my husband. This child opened my eyes to many things and made me realize that I was living my life wrong and that it was time to make some drastic changes. Why didn't you explain everything at the maternity hospital? Ben asked. You would have seen the look on your face. I thought you were going to annihilate me with that intense stare of yours. How was I supposed to look? What was I supposed to think? I thought you were happy with another man, and besides, how did Trisha find me? I have no idea, Zoe confessed honestly. She didn't tell me anything. That schemer. Will you come with me? Ben suddenly asked. What do you mean? Zoe didn't quite understand his proposal. I'm proposing that you come and live with me. Ever since we met, I haven't been able to settle down. At first I thought I would quickly forget about you, but then I realized that I might actually be in love. This was the first time something like this had ever happened to me. Ben walked over to Zoe, put his arm around her shoulders, and pulled her close. At that moment, they both felt like the happiest people on earth. Zoe wanted to answer yes, but the fear of the unknown held her back. Plus, she would be abandoning Trisha by leaving her alone. After all, her friend couldn't handle their joint business alone, and Trisha was the only person who helped and supported her in any situation. All this is very unexpected. It's not easy to drop everything and leave. Let's not rush things, especially since Leslie is too young to travel like this. So you're suggesting we wait until our daughter grows up? And when are we going to live? Ben blurted it out with reproach. Zoe remained silent. Ben wanted her to leave everything and go with him to the ends of the earth. But now her mind wouldn't allow her to make such a rash decision. She wanted to get to know him better and understand what kind of man he was. After all, love alone wasn't enough to make such an important decision and tie her life to his. She wasn't alone now, and she had to think about her daughter's well-being first. I won't pressure you, Ben said, sounding resentful. I'll be in here 3 more days. You have time to think things through and weigh your options. Ben kissed the sleeping Leslie in his arms, gently placed her in the crib, and silently made his way towards the exit. Zoe also remained silent, unsure of what else she could say in her defense. Perhaps he was right. She needed to think things through before making such an important decision. As soon as Tricia entered the apartment, Zoe immediately confronted her with accusations. "What a loyal friend I have! You should at least have warned me that he was coming. Why all the secrets? I thought we were close, and that there couldn't be any secrets between us." "I'm sorry," Tricia frowned. "I wanted to tell you about my plan, but then I was afraid you would forbid me from looking for Leslie's father. I only wanted what was best for you and your daughter. Did he hurt you?" "No." Zoe shared the entire conversation with her friend, feeling completely confused about her life and relationships. She didn't know what to do in the current situation. She loved Ben, but she wasn't ready to leave everything behind and chase after him with a child in her arms. "I think he's rushing things too fast," Tricia said. "Love is love, but you need to take time to get to know each other. You should calm down and talk things through together. Tomorrow is my day off. Don't worry about Leslie. I'll be happy to babysit her." Zoe didn't argue with her friend and called Ben to arrange a meeting. Deep down she realized that she didn't want to lose him anymore. After all, he was also human and unlikely to wait for her forever. "Hello," Ben smiled, holding out a bouquet of white lilies to her. "Wow, how did you know these were my favourite flowers?" Zoe smiled. "Tricia again?" "No, you told me yourself. Remember, we talked about why all women prefer roses." "Oh, yes, I remember," Zoe replied, surprised that he had recalled their conversations, even though it had been over a year since they first met. "I was up again this night, thinking about you and about my daughter. You know, being a father feels so strange. A sense of responsibility immediately kicked in. I understand your fear of taking this big step, but I promise you that I will never hurt you. Zoe, you won't regret coming with me. Please understand that I have a responsible position, and it is not so easy for me to leave everything and go to you. I have a stable life, a spacious apartment, a summer house, and there is no mistress of all this." Ben took Zoe's hand and carefully placed a ring on her finger, which he had been holding all this time. "Thank you," whispered Zoe. "I will go with you." In the evening, Ben had an unpleasant conversation with his sister Holly. He wanted to share his joy and happiness with her, telling her that her daughter and niece were born on the same day and were in the same ward. "Are you talking about Zoe now?" Holly guessed. "Wow, would you have thought? Wait, what makes you think the baby is yours?" "Ben, you're not stupid. Are you out of your mind? This woman has a husband, and he's the one she claims gave birth to her daughter." "That's enough," Ben interrupted his sister. "You can gossip among yourselves. I know that Leslie is my daughter." "You're out of your mind. She bragged to everyone in the maternity hospital that her husband is the father," Holly shouted. "I will never accept her into our family. She's so deceitful." "And you don't have to accept her," Ben retorted. "It's enough that I have accepted her into my heart and into my life." "You need to establish paternity first," Holly insisted. "No, let your husband establish paternity. I am sure about my woman." Ben shouted and put on his jacket. He left his sister's apartment, slamming the door loudly. A year had passed, and Zoe had long ago settled into her new place. Ben was right. She had never regretted believing his words. The man showered his family with a love and care she had never dared to dream of. "I'm home. How are you managing without me?" Zoe heard her husband's voice in the hallway and rushed to him. "Hello," the woman rejoiced. "Leslie and I always feel incomplete without you. You know that." "I miss you so much too. But what can I do? Work. What's new with us?" the man asked. "Tricia called, and just imagine, she invited us to her wedding, and she's very happy and 3 months pregnant. It's also strange, Zoe said, feeling at a loss. Darling, well, what's so strange about a young woman expecting a child and getting married? Laughed her spouse. No, I refuse to understand women's logic. The fact is that she was diagnosed with infertility a long time ago. How is that possible? Tricia had no hope of becoming a mother. Everything happened the way God wanted it to happen. I'm more inclined to trust him than doctors. So when's the wedding? I need to know beforehand. The day after tomorrow, Zoe said. Yes, your friend is really a master of surprises. The man laughed. Zoe didn't even realize that the most important surprise was ahead of them. Tricia met them at the airport. Zoe noticed from afar a stately man in an expensive business suit who was standing next to Tricia. Mentally happy for her friend, she hurried to meet her. But getting closer, Zoe stopped, speechless. Tricia's companion was her ex-husband, Tony. The man had transformed beyond recognition, becoming a respectable man. Looking at him, it was difficult to believe that he had been drunk for months, walking dirty and ragged. Meet my fiancé, Tony, Tricia said solemnly. I didn't say meet accidentally. It's not Tony, whom you've known for years. Now he is an entirely different person. Now he is not a loser, but the top manager of a chain of beauty salons and, at the same time, my life partner. That's it. Great, smiled Zoe. I'm surprised, but I'm truly happy for you both. In the evening, Zoe interrogated Tricia. She knew that her friend couldn't stand alcoholics and avoided communicating with them in every possible way. So Zoe really couldn't understand what had bound Tricia to Tony. Tricia, just no offence, but were you always in love with Tony? You just didn't want to admit it to me, Zoe asked. No, smiled Tricia. 6 months ago, I found him in my driveway. The frost was fierce then, and he was lying on the bench. I could barely rouse him, and when he woke up he kept mumbling, repeating your name. I felt sorry for him. I dragged him home and put him to bed. In the morning we had a long talk. In general, I offered Tony a job, and over time I realized that he was a wonderful man, but there was no one to guide him. And after a couple of months we realized that we loved each other. I hope you're not judging me. Oh, come on. Zoe hugged her friend, resting her head on her shoulder. I'm delighted for you. Do you think my soul didn't ache because of him? I thought about him every day, worried that he'd get drunk and disappear. I was also thinking about you, realizing how hard it is for you to be alone. And now I'm happy that everything in my life, and yours, has gotten better. You're doing great. For the first time, I saw a sparkle in Tony's eyes. And in yours too. The two women talked for a long time, glad that things had worked out as well as they could.